Good afternoon, patrons, and welcome to the August 2020 Patroncast. It is that time of the month again, and today you find me in very, very good spirits for two very important reasons. The first, this one is crucial. I'm recording this in September, and it's really cloudy today. It's pretty cool. It was pretty cool yesterday as well. Summer has been defeated. It's autumn. The heat waves are hopefully over until next year, because British housing is not meant for heat waves. They're built to keep heat in, not get it out. So, they're nice and toasty during the winter. During the summer, not so much, because when lots of British housing was built, it was, generally much colder, because things are warmer these days. So, yes, okay, the heat waves have been defeated, summer has been defeated. This is very, very nice indeed, because when I have to shut up a room to try and, stop external noise getting into it, and I've got, a big computer on, and especially the bloody PS4. Okay, the bloody PS4, which has been on a lot this last month because of The Last of Us 2, that thing just churns out heat. It's a little electric heater. The damn thing runs so bloody hot. So, yes, it got really, really uncomfortably hot. So, one, I'm cool, and secondly, way less importantly, the second bit, I may as well mention it, channel's done really well in August. It's really, really good indeed. 1 million more views in August than we had in July. More than 1 million more than we had in June. Now, views don't really, matter so much anymore because, ads revenue isn't really the biggest thing in the world. But, it still makes me feel good, damn it, because it means I know that people are watching and enjoying our stuff, which is really, really darn good. So it kind of just, gives me a pat on the back, so I know something's vaguely going right. And a load of those people were new people to the channel, because we got way more subscribers in the last month than we've had in for bloody ages. I think we have to go back to April 2019 for more subscribers in a single month. So that's brilliant. That's absolutely spectacular. And I'm just really proud of some of the stuff anyway, because we had loads of really cool stuff. We had multiple really well received video essays or kind of Fallout deep dives or roleplay stuff, which is really, really cool indeed. We had Fall Guys with Dan and Matt. We had some really good one-offs. I really enjoyed, say, Hitman 2 Ghost Mode with Matt, and Three Kingdoms with the Furious Wild that we got really early, and Grounded to Destroy All Humans. They were really good. We had some more Fall Guys. That was a really fun live stream. That's been a great addition to the live streaming. We've had some really good one-offs in general. I just think I'm really proud of what we've done in August. Now, I'm also really tired because this last week in particular has been... It's been a lot. It's been a lot because, I've had Crusader Kings 3 since the beginning of August, give or take, and I wanted to make videos ready for the launch, but Crusader Kings is obviously really, really, really bloody complicated, so I need to kind of play the game for 60 hours just to desperately try and understand it, and even then I probably made all sorts of mistakes. And then I had to make the special lifestyle video, which Paradox wanted, so you know what, part of the campaign was I got Crusader Kings 3 early, and I got to keep it and keep playing it after the campaign was done. So obviously, yes, we signed up with that. And then they said they wanted something a bit weird and experimental, because originally I made something for them that was way more traditional in format, long form, let's play, hour and a half, let's talk about all the mechanics one by one with a bit of fun roleplay during it. And they said, no, we want something way shorter, way more weird, way more experimental. So I kind of went away and said, okay, can I buy a great big tiger and marry my cat to it? And they said, yes, that's perfect. So we did cakes, we did flipping Tabby getting married, we did all sorts of weird stuff, and apparently Paradox loved it. So that was good. That apparently worked very, very well indeed. So, but that took ages. That video took absolutely ages. It took so long to prepare for it, to record it. Most of a day was spent on those 3 skits, because skits take a long time to organise. Then the other Crusader Kings 3 videos that came out around launch, they took ages to put together properly too. So, basically the calendar's worryingly red. It's worryingly red because there was just so much to be done for the launch of Crusader Kings 3. But I'm really glad with how it went. I think, like, I'm really proud of the videos we produced for that. And, obviously, by the time you hear this, the new series will have begun. I'm really happy with the first episode of that. I think it's a really strong first episode. And I've got a whole bunch of really fun, like, one-offs going forward. And obviously, just like, just in terms of me looking at a chart and saying, oh, yeah, that's a chart that's going upwards and to the right, not downwards and to the right. Yeah, obviously, Crusader Kings is generally going to be relied upon to do the numbers as a series on Monday and Friday. So September should hopefully be, like, as good as or maybe even better than August, which is really, really cool indeed. Especially as, there's some really special Fallout stuff coming later in September as well that I won't mention again in the slightest under any circumstances. So yes, it's been a good month. It's been a tiring month. I've done, like, I think I've probably, like, worked the most hours this last August than, like, any time I can remember in the last year. It's been a really, really damn busy month, but I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of it, especially as you can kind of see it. Like, you know what? I don't mind putting in the hours, but it's nice to be able to see the impact of that. So the fact that views are up and watch time is up and subscribers are up and everything, that's really nice. That just, that just cheers me up, damn it. So I'm just very glad to see all of that. Also, while I do think of The Last of Us 2, I did see a few people, like, asking for my take or opinion or whatnot. So, obviously, at the time of you hearing this, the finale only went out, like, a couple of days ago. And, like, me and Claire are both still, like, going over our thoughts on it. Because the thing about The Last of Us 2 is it's not simple. It's absolutely not a simple game. There's a lot going on, and obviously, it's all told in a non-linear fashion. There's a lot of different characters interacting in lots of different ways. There's things that are implied but not specifically told, and some areas, I'm aware, if I chose to, say, sneak through them, or it turned into a firefight, so I ran through them, I might have missed little bits of lore or notes or whatnot, so I don't have 100% the full picture. So it's gonna take me a bit of time to, like, process all of my thoughts, because the thing is, it's a very uneven game in many ways. Like, the second act, which I define as, like, Seattle, is really long and arguably pretty bloody bloated. You've got a very tight first act in and around Jackson, then you've got a really good third act, to my mind, out in, California. In fact, it's really weird, the third act, because I really like the structure of the third act. I like, just going between Ellie to Abby to Ellie to Abby, where Ellie's hunting Abby down and Abby's just doing her own thing. Because I think that's, like, a really interesting dynamic, where you've got the situation where Abby did something that really hurt Ellie, and she did it for vengeance, and she didn't need to, and she did it because, she gave into a bad negative emotion, the desire for revenge. But now, like, in the third act, she's moved on, she's doing her own thing, and she's doing something positive. She's found Lev, and she's keeping Lev safe. They're trying to get somewhere where they can just live their lives, and Ellie's trying to hunt her down, even though a lot of time has passed between what happened and now. And I feel like that's the more interesting dynamic. Because when we, like, run into Abby in the first place in Last of Us 2, she's doing some morally questionable stuff. She's signed up with the Wolves, and we know that the Wolves did some very bad stuff themselves. Admittedly, everybody in the game does very bad things, so it's kind of difficult to, like, rank people on the badometer. That's kind of impossible, but, like, we've heard bad things about the Wolves. We've seen notes saying, hey, the Wolves took over from Fedra, but it turns out the Wolves were just as bad, and the Wolves executed these people, and the Wolves actually did bad things. So, like, we're immediately suspicious of Abby, and then, like, really early on, the game very specifically chooses to have the script be like, hey, there was a ceasefire, but then, like, we shot those children. And Abby's like, yeah, I'm glad we shot those children. And Mel's just standing there like, no, maybe you shouldn't have shot those children. They were just kids. And Abby and Manny just like, nah, no, I'm glad we shot those children. We needed to shoot those children dead. It's like, okay, we don't know what the scenario is. Like, when you're saying children, do you mean like 10-year-old or 15-year-old? And when you shot them, were they just like name-calling and tossing something light that was harmless? Or were they like throwing things at you that actually posed a risk to your life? Could you easily have retreated, or did they have you surrounded? We don't know the scenario, but we do know that the game very specifically chooses to have the situation set up where Abby says, yes, I am glad we shot people that we have identified as children that broke a ceasefire that has now led to a hugely destructive war, where the game also has chosen to have another person who is in Abby's faction say, no, I think that was the wrong thing to do. And to be honest, I think Mel is one of the most sympathetic characters. I like Mel. Mel seems pretty decent. She was conflicted about, going on the mission and the revenge thing. For the most part, she just wants to be a medic. She wants to heal people. She seems to basically be a good person, for the most part. Very often she seems to be a bit suspicious of Abby, but then we kind of find out that's because she thinks Abby and Owen still have a thing for each other, which they do. She's 100% right to be suspicious. Yes, of course, sorry, I almost forgot. Yes, they do also specifically decide to have Abby and Owen having sex when he is in a relationship with his existing girlfriend, who's heavily pregnant. Like, there's a lot they do to make Abby not sympathetic for quite a long time into her story, and I feel like her story massively improves the moment she's partnered with Lev, because then she's taking care of somebody. She's trying to make sure that somebody is safe. They have really good chemistry. They bounce off each other really well. Like, I think the weirdest thing in The Last of Us Part 2 is how late Lev comes into the story. Like, just imagine an alternative take where instead of what we get, actually, the first time we're playing as Abby after Act 1, after the Joel situation, is Abby's just going along with some of her friends from the Wolves. Like, literally, they might be coming back from the Joel situation. It's been a long journey because they're travelling together on foot, diddly-diddly-dee. And they run into Lev, who is clearly on the run. Lev and Yara on the run. The Seraphites are coming in. And as a result of the fact that they're coming in and they're just gunning down everybody, the Wolves and Abby gun down the Seraphites and Yara gets killed and Lev's all on his own. And immediately the Wolves say, well, this isn't our problem. We're just going to move on. We can't just help every stray we run into on the road. And Abby chooses to say, no, I want to stay and help this person because, say she's the daughter of a doctor. So maybe from a young age she's been exposed to the idea that you ought to help people when you can, and that selfless public service to try and help people and heal people is a good thing, and that could be part of her character. And then we could sort of explain, oh, the reason why she went out of her way to kill Joel is because, one, that's her father, and two, she puts a really high value on, doctors and people who are trying to help people, and her dad was just trying to help people, and da-da-da-da. Now, that doesn't mean she's right, because you can argue the toss any way you want to, in terms of what happened in the hospital. But, it would put her and Lev together immediately. Then her and Lev go on their own adventure, they go and do their own thing. They're just moving on, living their life, being happy, trying to, do the right thing, help people out, diddly-diddly-dee, and then we just cut between that and Ellie, who's tracking her down the whole time. And as time goes by, you'd probably think, okay, Abby did do a bad thing, but now we're seeing she's doing good things, and we understand she did the bad thing for a particular reason. And Ellie, meanwhile, every time we're with her, is exclusively motivated by revenge, and her story can go broadly the same way, where she slowly alienates and pushes away and gets killed everyone around her who tries to help her because she's single-mindedly obsessed with getting revenge for Joel. Now that strikes me as a more interesting dynamic. I saw one of the questions specifically referred to Abby as the villain, which I think is a misinterpretation of what's going on. Abby isn't the villain any more than anybody in the game is the villain. Everybody gets a big dick moment where they get to be a massive dick to someone around them. When Tommy shows up at the end at the farmhouse with the map and is disgusted at Ellie for not jumping on yet more revenge and is very mean to her. That's a massive dick moment. That was a really nasty thing for him to do. The Wolves and the Seraphites, they all get moments where they do horrible things. Ellie does horrible things. Abby does horrible things. Everybody does horrible things. And as I said earlier, you can't really rank them on the badometer. But I will say I do find the pacing of the information we find out about Abby a bit on the weird side, because it is strange that, having had our initial exposure to Abby being, hey, she kills one of the characters from the first game, we spend a lot of time in the second act when we're with her, like, not getting the most sympathetic view of her at all, which feels... It feels strange, and I just wish more of the game was Abby just, living her life, doing her own thing, not being stuck in unrelenting misery. Because it means when we go between Abby and Ellie in the second act, they're both having a really bad few days. They're both doing a lot of murder, they're very miserable, their friends are dying, it's just a bad time all round, and it means their campaigns feel very similar. Like, if Ellie's campaign was like that, misery and whatnot, and everything going horribly wrong and her having just a terrible, terrible day, but Abby's campaign was a lot more positive and constructive, where her and Lev are just on a road trip, and they find a community and they help them out, and it turns out, say, Abby's got some medical training because, this is a world that's not going to have, formal medical training anymore. So as a result of that, as the daughter of a doctor, there's a good chance she was at some point taught some good first aid. So she arrives to community. She shows them how to use, some herbs and, sterilize bandages or whatever. I don't know first aid. So that's the thing I can't really talk about. But, imagine a situation like that where Abby and Lev are just, going around doing their own thing. And she thinks she's doing a good thing. She thinks she's helping. And she thinks that killing Joel was the right thing to do. From her point of view, it was the right thing to do. But equally, it was motivated by revenge. So in part, it wasn't. I just think that would be a more interesting story. So I think, lots of the pieces in The Last of Us Part 2 are really good pieces. They're just kind of put together in a slightly strange, imbalanced order. And sometimes it feels like there's a bit too much gameplay to the amount of plot that's available. Like, right at the start of Ellie in Seattle, the first thing you kind of do is you need to find a hotel. But there's a gate in the way, so you have to spend, an hour or 2 hours going through this big open area just to find petrol to put in a generator to open a gate. And, nothing plot-wise really happens. You're just sort of getting the fuel to put in the generator. And then, if I recall correctly, the second thing that happens after that is, yes, you get captured, there's the school thing. The school thing points you to the television centre, so you go to the TV centre, but everyone's already dead there. And, I assumed when we were playing as Abby that we were going to go back and visit that to recontextualise it, but no. That didn't happen. Abby never went back there and never actually even... did she even mention Leia? Because I don't think she did. I think she never cared. So, we never found out what happened at the TV station, aside from Seraphites presumably did it based on, the arrows or whatever. But, we never actually saw what happened there. And then Ellie goes to North Seattle, where there's, the dog section. But, while the dogs are really cool, that section goes on for, an hour and a half. Or thereabouts, and all that happens at the end is, oh, it wasn't Tommy after all, it was Jesse. But, they could have run into Jesse anywhere. She didn't need to go there to find Jesse. So it feels like, there's, 4 to 5 hours straight where nothing significant plot-wise actually happens that couldn't have been compressed very easily into a single hour where you could have introduced the best new mechanics from those 4 to 5 hours, which is mainly the dogs. Just have 1 hour, hotel, dogs, Jesse shows up on the run to the theatre, boom, done. Much faster, much tighter, much more focused. But, yeah, it's going to take me a long time to put my thoughts together. No plans for a video essay on this, by the way, because, yes, it's... Maybe I'll never have a single opinion, because every time I think about it, I come up with something new. Oh, that reminds me, by the way, before we get to the questions, last month, someone said that they would ideally like some form of, big audio-only merging together of all the parts of one series into, a mega podcast thing, just because they enjoy listening to my voice. So, okay, I asked them what they wanted, and they didn't specify, they said I should ask everybody. So, okay, if you're the sort of person who would just a ridiculous 20-hour-long MP3 of, just an entire series I've made, just back-to-back audio only, let me know which one you'd be interested in. And I will keep an eye on the comments, and, if one comes up a lot, or one option gets, lots of thumbs up or whatever, I will make that one in time for next month. So, if that's something you'd be interested in, let me know what you'd like to see, and I will have something for you by the next Patroncast. Right, all that out the way, let's dive into the questions. John, I'm an American who just fell in love with Formula 1 at the beginning of lockdown. Just wondering if you're an F1 fan. Not anymore, but I used to be. And my favourite driver and team is, I don't even know if Minardi exists anymore, but it was Minardi, because yes, Minardi were great. My favourite driver was always Mark Webber. because Mark Webber was brilliant. He was a Minardi driver when he first entered Formula 1, and back in those days, Minardis weren't supposed to do anything. They were just supposed to, make up the numbers and be space for extra advertising or something. They weren't really supposed to, win or anything. But Mark Webber, in his first ever race, he was Australian. This was back in the days when the Australian Grand Prix was always the first Grand Prix. Don't know if that's still the case. Hopefully it is. Yes, he actually, in his first ever Formula 1 race, in a car that was supposed to come last, pretty much by design, it was just a bad car. It just couldn't go as fast as the other cars. He came somewhere in the top 6, if I recall correctly. He got points. You weren't supposed to get points in a Minardi. That wasn't what they were there for, but he did. And he was so happy about it, because it was his home Grand Prix in his first ever race. So you know what, I just thought that's really nice for him. I hope he does well. He never actually won a championship, as far as I'm aware, but he did do very well later with Red Bull Racing. John, out of all the games scheduled for the rest of the year, what are you most excited for? Okay, forget the big ones, because everyone knows about that. 13 is getting its remaster at the end of the year. 13, the cel-shaded shooter from the PS2 GameCube era. Brilliant game. Really looking forward to that. Also, I think Star Wars Squadrons could be pretty bloody good, so I'm looking forward to that one too. John, if bows and arrows had been included in Fallout 4, working exactly the same as in 76, would you have allowed them in the no guns rule set? Yes, 100%, because, throwables are non-gun projectiles, and they're allowed, so therefore arrows would logically have been allowed, yes. Also, any chance of more Curious Expedition 2 streams anytime soon? Never say never. I might wait for, an expansion or update of some description before we feature it again. But yes, I do love the Curious Expedition, so 100% sooner or later. John, how exhausting was your birthday stream? Actually, not so bad. Because the thing is, previous years have been 8 to 9 hours where it's been exclusively me. Now that's exhausting. Because it's just me talking all the time. This was 12 hours, but it was split in 2, because Claire was there. So it was 6 hours each of us, plus there was a little break at some point as well. So it wasn't so hard on my voice. So that was good. That was good. And was it the most profitable stream ever? Yes. Yes, it was. It blew the previous birthday streams out of the water. Absolutely. And how are you enjoying Crusader Kings 3 so far? I love it. I just love it. I really, really do. Which is such a relief, because Imperator was solid. Imperator was solid, and I had a good time with it because it was classical, and that just happens to be something that really works for me. But it didn't really have, its own thing going on. It just didn't quite capture my imagination enough that after my first series, I ever really wanted to, dive straight into another series. Whereas Stellaris, every time I finish a series, I want to get straight back into another and have to, hold myself back to not do so. But Crusader Kings 3 stays very close to the spirit and soul of Crusader Kings 2. And for everything that's been taken away or streamlined, you get, more than that in terms of new stuff. So I'm so excited for it, because that's just the version that's available at launch with no DLC and no updates. That thing's going to be getting polishing and rebalancing and, DLC and free updates accompanying the DLC for years into the future. So it's going to be so exciting to watch it develop. John, how are you enjoying the 3 body problem? I finished it about 2 odd weeks ago or something, a week or 2 ago. I really enjoyed it. I did really, really enjoy it. It was great fun. And what I particularly enjoyed, actually, was the fact it was translated. Because it's got, the odd translator's note in it. And it's also got, the odd sentence, which you look at and you just think, that feels translated to me. Because it doesn't quite flow perfectly in English. And I don't mean that as a criticism. Because, of course, my background is ancient linguistics. I did a lot of translating back in the day. I know full well that, no languages are equal. Some languages have idioms or vocabulary or grammar that just doesn't work in a different language, and it can't translate perfectly. Puns especially, you can't make puns work from one language to another. It's just not gonna flipping fly. Humour, very difficult to translate, especially if it's based in certain context that the original audience would know and the translated audience would not. So I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it academically, just kind of looking at it and thinking, oh yeah, I think I can vaguely try and detect, what's going on in the original text versus how it's been attempted to be translated. and whatever. I really like, the little kind of cultural bits that, like, wouldn't have appeared to me immediately, but, like, have tried to be translated as best they can. I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I don't know, like, how much of it is in any way based on real science. Because there's, like, a weird bit where in an alien world they're, like, trying to unpack an atom or something, and they keep accidentally unpacking it. It's like, oh no, too few dimensions. Oh no, this time it's too many dimensions. And it kind of felt like a comedy skit, but for alien science. It was brilliant. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be funny. I found that scene really funny. But yes, I don't know whether there's any actual, like, vaguely realistic-ish science going on here. I'd like to assume it is. So I haven't ordered the second book yet, but I will be doing so. John, do you watch any YouTube yourself? Yes, regularly. I enjoy catching StarCraft 2, professional level games. I really enjoy watching competitive StarCraft 2. I like Jenny Nicholson, Lindsay Ellis. I think their video essays are really, really darn good. And I really enjoy the channel Dead Meat. I think that's like a relatively new addition. I don't think I've mentioned that one. I might have mentioned that one like once before. Where he like goes through horror films. Which is my favourite way to enjoy horror films. Because I conceptually and academically like horror. But I don't like going to the cinema to watch horror. Because I get too scared. So like having him talk through what did happen in a horror movie, I much prefer to actually watching horror. So it's a very good way for me to engage with the horror genre. John, what's a not so well-known movie you always recommend to people to watch and why? Okay, Chocolate. Not to be confused with Chocolat, which is a completely unrelated film. In fact, they couldn't be more different. Chocolate is a 2008 Thai martial arts film, and it is the most brutal, ridiculous film I've ever seen. It's hilarious, it's vicious, it's brilliant, and everyone in it is just spectacular, and like all the stunts are practical, and all the martial arts, like, there's no tomfoolery where the camera just keeps flicking from angle to angle to hide the fact nothing's happening. Like, everyone does their own stunts, everyone does their own martial arts. It's brutal and wonderful and hilarious, and it's just amazing, and I've got it on DVD. John and Claire, what do you consider to be comfort food? I enjoy Bakewell tarts and sorbet. I think those are good. Pizza also works pretty darn nicely. I'll go for those. Claire?
For me, that's definitely chocolate. Pretty much any type of chocolate, but I do have a preference for milk chocolate. And of course, also Nutella, which is a very nostalgic thing for me. We had it a lot as kids, so it feels very comforting to me.
Claire, as you've previously mentioned, you enjoy having and painting Warhammer 40k minis, despite not really liking Warhammer 40k all that much. Have you or John ever watched the Fan-Made Astartes micro-series on YouTube? I know of it. I've never watched it. I'm pretty sure I can confidently reply on Claire's behalf she's not seen it either, because honestly, I'm way more into the fantasy side regardless. John, what's the favourite collab you've done, and do you plan to do more of them in the future? Actually, yeah, we've had a bunch of collabs showing up over the last month. We've had Dan and Matt, we've had Matt and Hitman 2. I've showed up over on Dan's channel a couple of times, so we might well do a bit more of that. Now, as for my favourite, even though it was the first and it's probably a bit scruffy, like, the GTA heists will always have a special place in my heart, because, like, I did them so long ago, and it was the first thing I ever did with Dan, so that will always be a special thing for me. John, I love your videos where you go in-depth on the classics. Do you have any recommendations for podcasts that cover stories from that time period? To be honest, no, because my knowledge doesn't really come from, like, podcasts or whatever. My knowledge comes from the fact that, like, I just got my degree in it, like, a terrifyingly long amount of time ago. Actually, really terrifyingly long amount of time ago. Like, over a decade, dear oh flipping dear. So I guess it never, like, really appealed to me to listen to podcasts covering, like, the stories, because, like, most of those podcasts are probably going to be aimed at, like, a level of knowledge below what I already know anyway. So it just never really kind of appealed to me, to be honest. And I've still got, like, loads of books. Like, I've got so many primary texts and textbooks and whatever. So if I ever wanted to, I could just, like, dig back into the original. So I'm afraid not, just because I'm not really much of a podcast listener in general. I enjoy a good YouTube video. I enjoy my reading. I've never really got into podcasts. John, I was wondering if you were to roleplay the Courier in Fallout New Vegas as Claire, what would her special stats, tag skills, and traits be? Okay. Let's go over this. So, Claire always favours, just being a barbarian smashy thing. So, what we should probably do is... Yeah, okay. We'll go for strength of 8, so she can smash. We're going to go for perception of 2, which is higher than my perception of 1. But the thing you've got to understand about Claire is the glasses she wears are so thick it's almost unreal. Claire is blind without her glasses. So we've got to give her a low perception. Endurance of 6 to actually kind of, suit the barbarian loadout. Charisma of 7, I like her, so I assume she must be charismatic. Intelligence of 7, agility of 3, though maybe we could lower that, because Claire is, she's not exactly, graceful. Shall we say, I'm going to get some grief for this one. Yeah, you know what, I'm taking another point off agility, and I'm putting it into strength of 9. And then luck of 7, because she's dating me, so she must be very, very lucky indeed. So then we move on to tag skills. We'll give her, explosives and melee, because I feel like she'd appreciate that. And repair, because Claire is crafty and handy. So I think she'd be good at repair naturally, yes. And as for traits, we'll go for 4 eyes. She does indeed need glasses. And good natured. That seems like a good combo. John, what do you like to do to decompress after a stressful day? I like going on Am I the Asshole and reading all the Am I the Assholes and being a judgmental bastard. Because being a judgmental bastard to other people's lives just cheers me the flip up. Next question from Riley, who was asking about graphic novel recommendations. Now, Claire reads a lot more graphic novels than me, so I'm going to pass this one over to her. But Riley did also mention She-Ra, and of course, Noelle Stevenson's Nimona. Now, I've read Nimona in full. Nimona is brilliant. If you've not read Noelle Stevenson's Nimona, you should do. Nimona's absolutely beautiful. Anyway, over to Claire for graphic novel recommendations.
For graphic novels, I always recommend the Descender series by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. This is a really, really beautiful series of books about a young boy robot in a future where robots have been banned and outlawed, and he's just trying to find his family again. It's just really, really beautiful. The art is in this gorgeous watercolor style. It has to be my favorite art in any comic that I think I've seen ever. And then I also love On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden, which is a YA sci-fi comic about this girl who now works on the crew of a ship doing like archaeological salvage in space. But there's also flashbacks to when she was at boarding school.
John, how are you all doing with the virus, and has Tabby figured out stairs yet? So, okay, at the bare minimum, I think we can safely say the UK is dealing better with the virus than Tabby is with stairs. That's not saying much, because Tabby just doesn't understand stairs. Like, what we tried to do was, lure her down from the bed to use the stairs by laying fishy cubes on each step. So, we've got her from the top of the bed to the 3rd step, then down to the 2nd. And from the ground, using fishy cubes, we've got her from the ground to the 1st step up to the 2nd. However, she is yet to put 2 and 2 together to figure out that, 1, 2 could go into 3, leading to the bed without jumping, or that 3, 2 could lead down to 1, which would get her down to the ground without jumping. She hasn't quite got that yet. It's a work in progress. That's not to say the UK's doing spectacularly well right now. 60,000 people are dead and whatnot. But yes, there's a bit of a return to normality. More stuff is opening up. The schools have just gone back. I saw, bunch of pupils wandering around earlier today, in fact. So, yeah, we'll see whether that turns out to be a good idea in the long run. We'll have to see. Ask me again next month. We'll see how that turned out. Yes, someone specifically asked about the format of the Crusader Kings 3 sponsored video. Yep, it was originally going to be much more traditional, but as I say, they wanted it to be weird, experimental, short, and punchy, and they specifically asked for IRL cutaway gags. So, IRL cutaway gags were provided. It's not a new style I'm playing with or anything, though I will say, I have been letting Claire off the chain a bit recently with regards to thumbnails, and letting her make stuff that's a bit more wild and out there. So if you look at the recent thumbnails, yeah, there's some kind of fun stuff that Claire's come up with. I think she's been doing some really lovely work in that regard. John, have you ever thought about ending a series early because it's not been getting spectacularly good views? Not particularly, because the thing is, like I was mentioning earlier, views aren't really, the most important thing. these days. Like, in the old days on YouTube, back when YouTube, the only way you got paid was by ad revenue, and ad revenue was exclusively a function of views, people had to chase views, which is why back in the day, of course, there was lots of clickbait, and thumbnails were particularly as clickbaity as possible, because people just wanted those views. And whether people kind of stuck around or not was kind of irrelevant, because if they clicked and you got the ad, you got paid your ad revenue, so job flipping done. So, like, for me, it's much more about whether I'm having a good time with the game. Though, good actually kind of, that's not necessarily the right thing to talk about. Because, of course, yes, the thing about The Last of Us 2 is, if you're having a fun time playing The Last of Us 2, that's probably worrying. And you should speak to your therapist about that, because you're probably not supposed to be having a good time. Last of Us 2 is almost kind of more like a horror game, where you understand the intended experience isn't to be having a lovely, happy, fun time. But I find The Last of Us 2 really interesting. It's flawed, but it's super interesting. I've not discussed any game that I can remember with Claire more than The Last of Us 2. So, even though it didn't do spectacularly in terms of views, and it was occasionally a miserable time, I think that was the intended experience, and I had a really interesting time with it. Whereas some things I just get kind of like bored of, and I just don't really want to play anymore because I'm bored of the gameplay. And that was never true in The Last of Us 2. The gameplay was always pretty fun, very tense, very interesting. Whereas, say, some other series that I've dropped, like probably the biggest one was Red Dead Redemption 2, where I just got bored of the mission structure because it was so linear, and I just wanted to go around and explore the world and engage with it, like, you know, openly, because it's a big open world. But the moment I did anything in the world, I was straight into a mission where you were failed if you put one bloody foot out of line. You couldn't just, like, you know, say, okay, I need to kill someone, so how do I approach this building? Do I disguise myself? Do I sneak in? Do I go in the day or at night? And could I, like, you know, suddenly take out just one guard who's, like, you know, at a relatively unguarded entrance? Go and assassinate this guy? Or could I, like, you know, lead in some animals or something? No, the game's got a very clear idea precisely how you're supposed to be doing things, what order you're supposed to be doing things in. And I just got bored of it. Like, the game was an absolute technical marvel. It was so beautiful, but I just was bored playing. So that's why that series came to an end. So that's kind of the opposite of The Last of Us 2. So views really are not a driver for me, like, you know, making or not making a series, to be honest. John, have you watched much broadcast radio or television lately, or do you just watch streaming media? Plenty of streaming media, yes, but I do enjoy, say, Channel 4 documentaries. Channel 4 does make some very, very fun documentaries that for some reason streaming services just don't seem to do, possibly because Channel 4 being partially publicly funded, it's got to kind of, you know, come up with content for the public good. So very often you'll find, you know, detailed looks at, you know, niche issues affecting the UK, which you wouldn't really find on Netflix as much, where their documentaries, in my experience, seem to be a bit more sensationalist because they're just trying to get attention. Whereas dispatches and whatever on Channel 4 seem to be, you know, more interested in, like, you know, digging into bits and pieces. So yeah, on occasion I absolutely do still watch some television. Admittedly, I'm very often watching it on catch-up apps, so that's kind of still VOD anyway, I suppose. John, would you ever consider doing a podcast or video series where you talked exclusively about history or classics? I would love to, but I do not have the time. I just do not have the time at all. That would be such a major undertaking because, like, you know, when you're doing something where you're talking about historical fact, you've got to make sure you're right, and therefore you're saying things in just the right way. Because if you're kind of just, you know, making it up and off script, then even if you pretty well know something, you're going to make a mistake, you're going to get called out for it, and you're going to be wrong. And when you're talking about history, you can't be wrong. You've got to make sure you are as close to right as you can reasonably be when you're talking about areas of history where there is some historical questions due to lack of primary sources. So the whole thing would need to be researched, scripted, performed, edited carefully, then a video laid over the top. It would be a monumental amount of work. Like, every single episode would be probably more work than a typical video essay, and those are already a huge amount of work. So it's just not viable at the moment, as much as I would love to. John, the last DLC for Controllers dropped. Is it still somewhere in the schedule? Yes, I did get code for that. What is it, like Altered Worlds? Is that what it was called? Altered Worlds? I do have that, so at some point, yes, we will be looking at that. What game would Tabby do a Let's Play of if you could convince her to play something? Some variant of, like, Cookie Clicker, but where we've modded the game, so instead of cookies, it's fishy cubes, because she loves her fishy cubes. Sean, have you ever thought about getting into numismatics? This is the study of coins, and in terms of actually, like, you know, collecting coins, not so much, but I did absolutely study coinage, both in Roman and Greek history, so I do know my way around an ancient coin, but to be honest, I wouldn't really like to collect them, because to me it would feel weird to, like, privately own currency from the ancient world, because there's only so much of it floating around, particularly stuff that's in good condition, especially considering, you know, you want to be able to make out the pictures and the text and whatnot. Like, you might be holding a relatively rare historical relic that I feel ought to be, like, you know, preserved for the common good and knowledge of everybody. I'd feel really bad, like, privately owning anything from the ancient world. Like, you know, to go a bit Indiana Jones, it belongs in a museum or a library or some form of archive, so it can be maintained for common good and common knowledge. I'd feel awkward about privately owning anything from the ancient world, because I don't believe artifacts of bygone civilizations should be privately held at all. I'd feel somewhat uncomfortable with that, actually, yes. John, what do you think needs a buff and a nerf in Civ 6? I think science desperately needs a nerf, specifically in the sense of the science victory. Because overwhelmingly, every time I play, like, a higher difficulty game, I always see the AI moving towards a science victory long before anything else. Like, if I'm playing on Deity or something about that level, the AI always goes for the science victory. It's always science, never anything else. It just feels like tourism never stands a chance. So I feel like somehow the science victory needs a nerf and the culture victory needs a buff. Because I don't know what it is, but somehow the bonuses that the AI gets at the high difficulty levels, it just feels overwhelmingly like when you're playing on Deity or thereabouts, it's always the science victory that you need to be racing for. John, you mentioned at one point it's nice in Fallout 76 that menus don't pause the game. There's a mod for Fallout 4 that does that. It's called Fall Souls. You don't even need a mod, actually. It does happen in Fallout 4 VR. It's a really cool thing about VR. I won't be doing it for Fallout 4 Year of Launch, though. That's going to be difficult enough, especially as I am going to be adding in some extra rules already. Also, what's your opinion on the whole score thing now that Season 1 of Fallout 76 is done? Well, after I recorded that video, I never went back to it because it just seemed too big and too intimidating and too grindy, so I guess that should tell you everything you need to know. Also, do you think that the Pip-Boy not pausing the game should be standard in Fallout games going forward? No, but I would make it a part of, say, you know, survival mode or hardcore mode or whatever you're going to call it. Like, next time there is a big optional super difficulty, I would add it into that, but not the base game. John, have you ever played any of StarCraft 2's co-op mode? No, because until you mentioned it, I didn't know it existed. So I went and looked some of it up, and to be honest, I'm a bit disappointed that it seems like it's not very narrative. It's just like, you know, constant wave survival. So I was a bit underwhelmed with that. I would have preferred just, you know, a straight co-op mode with a strong narrative focus of some description. But it seems to just sort of be, you know, set during the end war, so they can have the excuse of, oh yes, so now everyone in the world is just throwing themselves at you, just survive against waves at the end of the universe. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed in that regard, unfortunately, and as I've not played it, I really can't speculate how any of my characters would be added into it, because yes, I just do not know enough about the mode. John, what do you think would be your game of the decade for the 2010s? Now, this is probably going to be a controversial pick, because this is a game which absolutely you can make all sorts of criticisms about, but it's also a game that I have gone back to more often than any other game from this decade. And that game is Skyrim. I know, there's all sorts of things wrong with it, and there's things that are too simple and diddly-diddly-dee, but like, I find Skyrim, for me, is evergreen. I can go back to Skyrim over and over and over again and have a great time with it. So, for me, it's got to be Skyrim. John, I've been trying to play Civ 6 on King difficulty. I always quit an hour in because the AI likes starting wars with me, takes one of my cities. It's very frustrating. As a deity player, what advice do you have for how to play on the harder difficulties? Okay, so once you have a feel for where the AI is, don't settle anywhere near them. Let them settle near each other, and hopefully they will go to war with each other, wiping out their strong initial armies. Other than that, try and get to walls as fast as possible. Some civs have the ability to say, like, you know, pop up walls fast or using faith or whatever. So, like, you know, if you can pick a civ that is good defensively in terms of walls, that can be pretty solid. Because, honestly, it doesn't really matter how many, like, warriors or slingers the AI throws at you. If you've got a city that's got walls up, they're not getting in. They're just not getting in, because generally the very early game AI is not going to be bringing along catapults or anything. They're not going to be bringing along battering rams or towers. It's just going to be a wave of warriors and slingers, maybe the odd archer. As soon as you've got walls up, you should be able to just basically wear those guys down for the rest of the time, especially if you've got your own archer in a city. Like, to my mind, even on the highest difficulty, if the AI says, oh, we're coming for you and we're clearly coming at this one city that's closest to us, if it's got walls and you've got one archer inside that city is safe. That city's not going anywhere. So that's going to be absolutely a-okay. John and Claire, if you were to swap channels for a short while, what would be the first video you made on each other's channels? Okay, I know about this. I know precisely what I'd do. So what I would do is I would do a book haul on Claire's channel, but like every single book, I would be somewhere else ridiculous. Like, I'd go scuba diving and you wouldn't be able to hear me. I would just hold up a book and vaguely gesticulate at it. I'd go to a theme park and very loudly try and yell a recommendation for a book over the screams of everyone else and the whistling of the wind. Possibly I'd put up like a green or a blue screen. I'd put myself into various films like the Death Star Trench Run or whatever. That'd be brilliant. Basically, I'd just do a book haul where every single book was me in another ridiculous place. Very often where the place I'm in obscures me from actually recommending the book because you can't hear me. That's what I do on Claire's channel. Over to Claire.
Oh, 100% if I were going to take over Many a True Nerd for any length of time, the first thing that I would do is play The Sims 4, because I absolutely adore The Sims. I don't know what series I would make or what video I would make, but I probably would do some kind of a challenge run. I love me some legacy challenges, Rags to Riches challenges, that kind of thing. So that's probably where I would go, but I don't have a very specific idea of what it is that I would do. Just faff around in The Sims 4 for a little bit.
And also, have you ever considered doing an April Fool's post or anything of that nature? Probably not. Because, like, you know, it would be kind of weird for me and Claire to deliberately mess with each other's channels for April Fools, because it would probably just mean both of our communities were left a bit on the unhappy side. So probably best we don't actually do that. John, any chance of another Fall Guys community playday? I'm going to wait for Season 2, which is pretty darn soon, but when that shows up, yes, 100%. John, if you could go back in time and watch any technology being invented, prototyped or tested for the first time, what technology would it be? Greek fire, which hopefully did actually exist, yes. Also, what's your favourite brand of tea? PG Tips man myself. Good man, I also enjoy PG Tips. That's my favourite brand of breakfast tea. John, would you mind sharing what years you lived in Seattle? I never lived in Seattle. I did visit it at length because I knew people there, but I never actually lived in Seattle. So, okay, the times I was in Seattle would have been, hang on. The first time would have been late summer 2000 and... Wait, what year was that? Late summer 2000 and... No, it couldn't have been. It couldn't have been late summer 2000 and... 2008! That would have been it. It would have been summer 2008. That's when I spent a lot of time in Seattle. I was there for like several weeks, possibly like a month or two. I can't remember exactly now. And then I visited again in... Would have been about 2011. Would have been the time I went after that. Then a flying visit in 2013? Thereabouts, anyway. John, you said your biggest problem with Total War Saga Troy was a lack of ambition. If there was one thing you could have added in that would have tipped the scales from a solid Total War to a damn good one, what would you have added in? Honestly, I wish they just embraced the full myth side of things, because it's really weird that they say, oh yes, this is the truth behind the myth, this is a grounded Bronze Age total war, but then they add, like, you know, really large giant barbarians who are physically larger than everyone else, and the all-female harpy assassination squad who run around invisible and then toss really powerful javelins. Like, that's not even remotely history. If you're going to go completely off history in that regard, why not just go off history entirely and have mythological creatures and gods? Because then you could literally have gods walking along the battlefield, being massive and stuff, and fighting each other, because the Theomachy, the Battle of the Gods, is a really important part of the Iliad, damn it. So I wish they just fully embraced the silliness and gone for, like, monsters and gods and stuff. That would have helped it along, I think. John, have you ever considered an ironic Minecraft Let's Play? No, because honestly, like, anything I could do there will have been done. Like, it's just a game where there's nothing I could add, so I don't think that's gonna fly. John, Factorio now has giant death spider robots that fire mini nukes. Do you think there's a chance we'll be seeing you playing it again? Yes to Factorio, probably no to giant death spider robots. Because honestly, I prefer playing Factorio on, like, peaceful mode or whatever it's called. Because, yes, I have a lot more fun just sort of, you know, trying to optimize a big production line without having to just constantly build turrets to deal with random waves of enemies. Also, any chance of more Graveyard Keeper, originally featured back in 2018? Honestly, no. It was a game that was just sort of fine. It was solidly put together, but it didn't really grab me in any way. So, of all the games that could return, that's definitely not really high up on the list. That's very unlikely to be seen again. Very interesting thing here I can't remember if I've actually ever talked about before. Randomizers. In terms of, yes, me playing them. Honestly, I just don't really kind of get randomizers. Like, you know, academically I see what they do, but I always find it very disappointing when I'm watching, like, you know, awesome games done quick or whatever, and think, oh my goodness, it's going to be this game, I'm so looking forward to this. Oh, it's a randomizer. Then I immediately lose interest and I don't watch the run, because I just find, like, you know, the actual game where people are showing off their knowledge of the game and its systems much more interesting than them just sort of running around trying to find something at random. So I really don't enjoy Ocarina of Time randomizer runs. I much prefer just, you know, Ocarina of Time. So at some point we'll probably have, like, you know, that featured on the channel at some point sooner or later. I don't know precisely when, but it wouldn't be a randomizer. They're just not for me. They just don't really sort of click in my head. Also, question from, an apology owed to Anthony, who is apparently a big fan of flight sims and is trained as a pilot, and was hurt by the fact that I didn't use the map to figure out where I was in Microsoft Flight Simulator when I was lost over England. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I had literally no idea there was a map. So if you're wondering why I didn't use the map, it's because I didn't know there was a map. And if you're wondering why I didn't know there was a map, it's because planes are bloody complicated and there's 10 million cocky buttons. So I guess I missed that one. Sorry. John, have you ever watched any of the fan films or machinimas that are out there for Fallout? Not many, but I did watch the original series of Nuka Break, which, for, you know, something put together by fans, was pretty darn solid, all things considered. Though, I can't recall any others off the top of my head. Recommendation for Overly Sarcastic Productions. Two-person channel, one's a classicist does history videos, one's a writer talks about tropes. So, okay, that sounds fun, I'll give that a look saying. John, would you rather get gnomed in the face or somehow become Timmy and be forced to dance with your dad? I'll take the gnoming, because then at least it's over quickly. Also, and this one will never leave me behind, so comment on the 150,000 subscriber special, Pokemon Gotta Cull 'Em All, where apparently I committed a terrible sin, which is I said a Pokemon didn't look very good, when apparently it's like one of the strongest competitive Pokemon in Gen 6, because I said Talonflame looked like trash. Now, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry that I said that, because clearly Talonflame is amazing, but hopefully you can understand why I look at a fire-flying type, something that can't even enter the field under Stealth Rock without losing half its entire health bar, and think, okay, I'm not convinced by this, alright? Moltres, complete and utter trash. Alright, fire flying, not exactly a good typing in a world where Stealth Rock exists. But apparently, somehow, Talonflame is good anyway, and people are going to be bringing up the fact I said it looked like trash for the rest of time. John, if you could do a collab with a highly intelligent species that have never played video games before, what game would you choose? What do you think would be the most difficult concept to teach them? The original Donkey Kong, because, okay, let's start them on something simple, because there's going to be a lot to get your head round there. And it's a fairly simple game without being completely linear, so I feel like it's a good introduction. In terms of the most difficult concept to teach them, probably they'll need to figure out why pies are so dangerous. Like, those were pies, right? Mario was in a pie factory, but for some reason, the pie killed Mario if he touched the pie. Why did the pie kill Mario? John, any plan to cover Hades when it leaves early access sometime this autumn? Yes, 100% we will be doing. John, how goes solving the problem of too many mid-roll ads on old videos? I think I know how to fix it, it's just going to take some time to do. So this week wasn't a good week to do it. But next week, we've got a bit more time, by which I mean when Claire's got a bit more time, I think I know how we can sort that out. Also, recommendation for the game Among Us. Yes, I've heard of this, where, yeah, there's like 4 to 10 players, and most of you are trying to fix the ship, but one of you is an imposter who is trying to kill the others and sabotage the ship. I think I've seen a trailer for this, so at some point I wouldn't bet against it, but there have been quite a few multiplayer collab-y sort of games floating around recently, so I haven't even got to some of them yet, so maybe it'll have to wait its turn, but don't be surprised if it shows up sooner or later. John, after Dina's story arc, did you eventually learn how pregnancies work? I will say, a lot of people were just jumping on me in that, saying that, you know, apparently it's completely to be expected that one day a pregnant woman is just, you know, going around, horseback riding, killing zombies, climbing things, action hero, and the next day she's just completely out of it. So, okay, apparently pregnant people, you need to be really, really bloody careful around them, because they just go from 100 to 0 in 24 hours, and that's actually how it works. I had no clue. This is terrifying information. John, if you, Claire, Dan, Matt, and Tabby all woke up as animals, or different animals, what would you be? I'd be an owl, Claire would be a normal domestic cat, Dan would be an octopus, Matt would be a ferret, and Tabby would be still a cat but much bigger, like whatever the biggest big cat is. John, any chance of another look at Wasteland 3 now that's just come out? I would like to, but I'm not sure how I'd fit it into the schedule, to be honest. Like, now games have actually started coming out in September, things are getting a bit more crowded, so maybe, but I'm not 100% sure how I'd make it happen. John, after your previous recommendation for the plays of Sophocles, what else would you recommend in terms of reading primary texts of ancient Greece? Go for a collection of the plays of Euripides, and go for whichever one has Hippolytus in it, because Hippolytus is, to my mind, by far the best of the plays of Euripides. Like, it's a flipping roller coaster, it's action-packed. For a Greek tragedy, it's so exciting. John, I'm curious about the engagement you've had as a YouTuber with some of the more well-known game studios like Paradox, Creative Assembly and Bethesda. What size did you have to grow the channel to before they started engaging with you? Now, that's not easy to answer because the thing is, part of the reason, like, you know, Bethesda would speak to me is because the channel was fairly well known for Fallout. We were pretty well known within the Fallout community, so therefore we could have been smaller, but still spoken to them, because we punched above our weight a bit. Paradox seem to be pretty chill about speaking to people who are pretty small, as long as they've got some audience for Paradox games. Creative Assembly, I think, are the same, so it's not about size, it's about size of people who are specifically interested in that studio's creations. Because, you know, these people aren't stupid. They absolutely know that raw numbers mean nothing. Now, in theory, if you got big enough, like, you know, you've got over 1 million subscribers, they'll speak to you anyway. Because why wouldn't they? No matter what you put on the channel, it's still going to get a lot of flipping views. But you can be like, you know, small, like in the high hundreds or low thousands, and Paradox and Creative Assembly will absolutely speak to you if you've done lots of videos about their stuff, and it does get views, it does get comments, etc. As long as you've clearly got some form of engagement and you've actually put the time in, and you know your stuff and your video's interesting and you clearly vaguely know what you're talking about, you can get on those creator programs. It's not even that difficult anymore. In fact, it's easier than it used to be, because these days, Paradox and Creative Assembly have their own creator programs, where like, if you're part of that program, you get access to things nice and easy. They didn't used to, so it's easier to get on those programs now than it used to be, because it used to be you'd have to speak to, like, the general community manager about anything you wanted to speak to them about. Now there's actual, like, specialized programs, so it's all automated a bit more easily. So it's definitely not as hard as it used to be. Small channels can absolutely speak to big publishers. John, pick a film, you can keep one character, everyone else is replaced by Muppets. Shawshank Redemption will keep Morgan Freeman. John, how is Tabby? Currently sulking because Claire thought she might be cold, so laid out a little heated mat for her, tried to pick her up to put her on the heated mat, and Tabby objected to being picked up, so is now sulking in a corner. So she's not having the best day. John, if you had to retrain and start a new career unrelated to anything you've ever done before, what would you like to do? I'd like to learn a programming language. I would love to just learn some programming and just start working my way up there. That sounds really fun. John, in Fallout 4, if you could upgrade Synth Sean at any robot workbench, what kind of upgrade would you give him? Laser eyes, obviously, because basically if the option exists, why wouldn't you give someone laser eyes? Also, why is it in every Fallout 3 run I've seen you do, when you're heading to the mall for the first time, you always take the exit to the Museum of Technology, rather than the much safer exit to the Museum of History? Because overwhelmingly, when you're going to the mall for the first time, it's to do Three Dogs Quest, so you're going to the Museum of Technology. So if you came out Museum of History, you'd be the wrong side of the mall. And, like, it would take ages to go all the way round, and then you'd have, like, a brute between you and the Museum of Technology. I just go close to where I need to go, that's it. John, one day everybody on Earth gets gifted any superpower they want, but any duplication of superpower requests means no one gets that particular power. What power do you choose? I get to stop time, but only while I'm wearing an enamel badge of a penguin that's green. So it's a standard power, but with a really stupid criteria attached, and then I can just, have some green penguin enameled badges commissioned, and boom, I get my superpower, job done. John and Claire, what would be your dream meal? Oh, that's tricky. That's really tricky. You know what? Some of the best meals I've ever had have been when I was visiting Italy, because, fresh Italian pasta, actually from a real Italian restaurant, can be spectacular. So, you know what? Let's go for that. Let's say I'm in Italy and I get myself a beautiful plate of fresh Italian pasta and some beautiful Italian gelato for dessert. Spectacular. Claire?
Ooh, I really like John's idea. I don't know that I could pick one perfect meal or one dream meal, because there's so many delicious ones. But one thing that I would really like to do at some point in my life is to go to one of those really fancy pubs that have Michelin stars, very, very famous chefs that have chosen to not do poncy, science-y micro food, but instead are just this is a gastropub where everything is ramped up to being the absolute best that it can be, but still it's a fish and chips, or it's sausages and mash or whatever. There are a couple of places in the UK that I've looked at before, but you probably need to book months and months in advance, and it's quite expensive, so it's on the one day kind of dream list rather than a plan.
John, have you ever tried the Fear game series? No, but I've heard good things, so at some point that'd probably be a fun thing to just sort of do as a bit of a one-off or something. So, Halloween is coming in the not too distant future. Watch this space. John, what's your favourite game launcher? Honestly, I'm pretty ambivalent, just in terms of, functionality. I don't really care for the most part, because all they exist to do is help me launch the game. I'm only going to be in them for a matter of seconds, so I guess Steam sort of wins by default, just because, that's where most of my games are. But if I had to pick one purely on functionality, I actually do quite like Uplay, because I like the fact that, just by playing the games, you get whatever the Uplay currency is called, and you can use that to immediately get unlockables within the game while you're playing it. And it's really easy and simple to be awarded currency, and then use it to get, like, you know, free little micro updates that are just aesthetic or whatever. That's fun, I like that, because generally, like, when you're given, like, Steam points, you can't redeem them for anything in-game, you redeem them instead for stuff in Steam. So, I guess Uplay of all things, which is a bit weird. John, how's you, Claire and Tabby? Much improved for summer being bloody over, that's certainly true. Have you ever heard of a game called There Is No Game Wrong Dimension? No, I've no idea what that is. Hang on, I'm going to look it up. Okay, so it looks like some form of, like, deeply surreal point-and-click meta thing going on, which looks admittedly kind of fun. Okay, maybe we'll give that a look-see at some point. John, you should make or sell a t-shirt that has the bear is still around on it. We should make and sell any merch. We're so bad at doing merchandise. But, yes, that's a thing we should probably do, yes. Another question about the birthday livestream. Is it the most watched livestream? Yes, though, to be honest, had we done Fallout 3 anytime, it probably would have been more watched than most things, so hard to say to what extent the high viewership was birthday versus Fallout. Any chance of a Vault Boy cake together with Nuka-Cola for the next channel cooking anniversary video? Honestly, I feel like yes, just, you know, a decorated cake might be a bit simple. We need to keep escalating this till eventually somehow I burn down the entire house, so maybe, but I feel like that's a bit simple. A handful of very specific questions about The Last of Us here, so yes, Owen. I was a bit confused about Owen. I did actually tweet about him, because I kind of felt like, you know, it really felt like he was supposed to be a selfish arsehole from the way he was characterised. So I tweeted about this, and I got a really wide range of responses. Like, some people who liked him, some people who hated him, but a lot of people seemed a bit unclear as to, like, what his personality was supposed to be. So there was definitely no consensus there, and I still think he seems to be primarily motivated by selfishness, which I do not approve of. Also, yes, I did not recognise the sniper. I had no idea that was Tommy whatsoever. Completely no idea. Missed that entirely, sorry. Now this is a very interesting one, which is when Ellie started collecting cards in The Last of Us 2, I was fine with that, but I was disapproving of Abby when she was collecting coins. Why was that? Okay, so it's a matter of tone, because when Ellie starts collecting those cards, the game's in a very different place. She's just in a bar about to go on a stroll with Dina or whatever. Like, you know, the stakes are very low. The nastiest thing in her life right now is she seems to be having a bit of an argument with Joel about something, and some guy was a dick to her at the dance last night. So that's it. Like, the stakes are low, so therefore, if she wants to engage in something light and fluffy, that's fine, because it seems to fit in with the game. So the first card she finds, I believe, is the one in the bar. But then, by the time you get to Abby, the game's already sort of showed its hand, which is, this is a game about misery and revenge and people making terrible choices that slowly alienate and destroy all the relationships around them, leaving nothing but salted earth, corpses and misery behind them. So the moment Abby starts collecting coins, it feels way more out of place, because you already understand, hey, I'm literally playing the backstory of a woman who's about to have all her friends murdered and then possibly either murder or be murdered by the main character of the game. The game's in much more of a dark place at that point. So it feels way more out of place, because, like, the first coin we pick up in Abby, you've got to remember, is in the flashback. Because we go back with Abby, and, like, you know, it's the day before Ellie arrives at the hospital. So at that point, Abby's just, you know, out on a lovely, lovely stroll. So it vaguely makes sense she picks up a coin. But then the next coin she picks up is in the future, when she's having this nightmare horrific day where everybody's dying and the Seraphites are all around her and she's desperately trying to survive the worst 3 days of her life, but she's still collecting coins. And it feels more out of place as a result of that. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't feel out of place that Ellie keeps collecting the cards, but you may notice that, like, after a certain point, when the game started getting a lot heavier, I cut that out. So you never saw Ellie pick up another card as far as I'm aware, because every time she did, I didn't show it because it felt a bit out of place. That little fetch quest didn't really work for me in a game where, you know, a light-hearted, oh, let's read the text on the card, and oh, that's a really fun idea for a superhero, didn't suit the environment it was in and what was going on in the narrative at that time. So that's why I reacted to those two things differently, I think. Though, very good question. John, have you ever watched Horrible Histories? No, but I read them. Back when I was a kid, they hadn't made any of the adaptations yet, but we still had the books, so I read the books. Unfortunately, you referencing, yes, someone who apparently did some of the either voices or acting in Horrible Histories, and I've never seen any of the adaptations, so I do not know. Also, do you and Claire ever recognise names, either people in Patreon asking questions every month, or people who show up in the live streams? Yeah, all the time, absolutely. Like, absolutely, I know the regulars. Claire in the live stream probably knows the regulars better, because I have to keep most of my attention on the game, though I do still have a chat, like, in the corner of my eye, just kind of strolling past too. So, absolutely, I recognise the regulars, though in the live stream, Claire would probably be better at me than that. John, will we see more Claire in Fall Guys? No, I think I'll spare her that. It's clearly just not Claire's thing. John, with the Patroncast becoming longer and longer and this comment section on Patreon growing to ridiculous degrees, do you have any plans to tackle the problem? I don't consider this a problem. It's fine. I just take a day out to do nothing but record the Patroncast. Claire takes a day out to do nothing but edit the Patroncast. It's fine, it's under control. Lots of people seem to like the fact it's ludicrously long, so I don't really consider this a problem that needs solving, to be honest. John, will you be continuing with Pillars of Eternity at any point? Yes, I would like to, but I'll need to figure out how. Because, there's a bunch of games I would like to, have more of on the channel. Wasteland 3 just came up a moment ago. And then we've got, Pillars of Eternity. Just this evening I looked at Alpha Protocol. Really enjoyed that, actually. Would love to do more of that. So, not sure how we're going to fit any of that in, precisely. Probably live stream. John, do you or have you ever played Magic the Gathering? No, because when I might well have got into that when I was a teenager, I could not afford to get into that. So, no, I've literally never played Magic the Gathering. No idea what's going on there, aside from the fact that clearly it involves cards. John, I was wondering if we'll see you play as a Baltic pagan in Crusader Kings 3. Well, by now, the series has started, so not quite a Baltic pagan, but close enough by. I hope you're satisfied regardless. John, as a university teacher, I'm currently offering parts of my lectures as pre-recorded videos. Could you share some of your wisdom when it comes to making videos? If you're ever not 110% sure about any take, any sentence, record it 3 times over, then fix it in editing. Or to be precise, get Claire to fix it in editing. If you don't have a Claire, find a Claire. She's very important. And apparently on the 17th of August, it was Blair's birthday as well as mine. So, happy birthday to us! That sounds weird. That sounds so weird. I prefer saying me or you to that. Us sounds really weird and happy birthday. John, between how to make a good Fallout game and 10 things I want to see in the Fallout TV show, do you think you have the ear of anyone in Bethesda that may take any of that to heart? Now, I have been told there are people in Bethesda that watch my videos, and I have been told in the past that when I make, really big videos about, a list of suggestions for Fallout 76 or whatever, they are in some capacity circulated around Bethesda. Now, I don't know whether anyone actually important or high up ever sees them. That is just what I have heard from a handful of people inside Bethesda who I can talk to on occasion. So, I don't know, basically. If they do, they don't tell me. John, canonically, how many eggs do you contain? It's always been 6. I've always been a standard 3x2 egg box. I'm pretty sure that's been true in every form of video we've ever made. So it's always been 6. Also, what is the ideal amount of eggs in one's carton? It is full up. You always want to be full up, if at all possible. So I feel like, you definitely want to be having a 3x2 egg box with all 6 eggs inside it, yes. John, based on the history of the Fallout universe, in January 2077, was there any way to avoid nuclear apocalypse soon after, or was it at that point inevitable? It wasn't, because the simple thing is, we don't know precisely why the war started. According to certain sources in-game, it was potentially an accident, or it was done by aliens, or it was an accident involving aliens. So, given aliens do appear to, canonically exist in the Fallout universe, they've showed up too many times for us to come to any other conclusion. if humanity had discovered the aliens, and the fact the aliens have, death rays and stuff, those little alien pistols that show up all the time, then potentially America and China could have put aside their differences to, fight aliens. So had the aliens been discovered, that might have done it. Or alternatively, if you believe the Fallout 3 notes in Fort Constantine, just let the people who are operating the nukes get a good night's sleep. Then they won't accidentally launch nukes. John, Spelunky 2 is finally coming out this month, which made me realise the original Spelunky has never been on the channel. And I would like to feature it at some point. Actually, I know very little about it. It looks super cute. I know Dan likes it, and he's generally got pretty good taste. So, okay, this is probably a good chance to do a double bill. So, whenever Spelunky 2 is going to come out, I'll try and do like Spelunky, then Spelunky 2 in like the same week if I can. And also to another birthday, Joe, whose birthday was the 16th of August. Happy birthday to you! Yeah, that sounds much better. I'm so much happier singing that. Thank you for restoring normality, Joe. And a follow-up question, is there any chance of a gigantic super game in Paradox at any point? Where, I take a Crusader Kings game and move it forward into Europa Universalis, etc., etc. Honestly, no, because by the time I'm done with any playthrough, I'm probably in such a dominant position that, then moving that forward into another game would be so weirdly unbalanced and not the intended experience, it would probably make the subsequent game less enjoyable. Now, I guess you could argue, in Crusader Kings, you form a ridiculous super empire, then obviously you play on the very far side of the world from them, in Europa Universalis, build your own super empire, and then maybe, watch whether your original super empire collapses or gets even stronger, or diddly-diddly-dee, and maybe they fight, maybe they don't, and then you move forward again, and then you've got two super empires, because I assume Europa Universalis is allowed to move forward into Victoria 2, right? Is that the right order? Or is it Hearts of Iron after that? Does Victoria hook into this chain? I can't remember. Maybe is the answer. But I wouldn't do it for my first playthrough of anything, so therefore it's not going to happen until at some point I've got round to Europa Universalis 4, and also Hearts of Iron, maybe Victoria if that's a thing, and in the meantime, new games are going to come out. So right now, Crusader Kings 3 doesn't hook into Europa Universalis 4, and maybe they're waiting for the next generation of those games to come before they do hook together, so in which case Bebbly Bebbly Beebly Beebly Boobly Boobly Bee. So basically I don't know. John, what's the strength of The Last of Us as a series? Now that's interesting because they're very different games from each other. Really, it's just the absolute core gameplay of stealthy, sneaky, stabby, etc., which is very good. It's very good, solid, core, dependable gameplay in both 1 and 2. But narratively, 1 and 2 are worlds apart from each other. So it's kind of hard to say, there's one thing that's a strength that kind of links them both together. I suppose, the character work, I suppose, is the most important thing, because both in terms of animation and script and voiceover and the way that characters interact with the world and each other, that's always been the strong suit of 1 and 2. So I guess it feels like a cheap easy answer, but it's the characters. And as a follow-up, are there any lows? Probably the rare moments, rare in 1, a bit more common in 2, where you get into an area where the game says, okay, now go over there, and it's going to take you an hour or two to get over there, and there's no actual narrative or character development between here and there. Just, zombies. So many zombies. Have fun just sneaking around zombies for 2 hours. That can be a little bit tiresome. Very rarely happens in 1. 1 tends to be very tight and focused, straight from one character beat to the next. 2, that's where the bloat comes in, yes. John, given the success of the Fallout video essays, are there any thoughts on video essays on Total War or Crusader Kings? Well, Crusader Kings just had a big guide that was a bit like an essay, in a way, and Total War did once have the, Rome Total War is completely broken and I love it anyway, which was kind of a video essay. So, you're right. You're 100% right that you could do a video essay on either of those, and I suspect it would be very successful. So, At some point I may well do. Like, my first non-Fallout video essay will probably be on Mass Effect 3, as I've mentioned a few times before. But you know, never say never, they may well both have one sooner or later. The most bafflingly specific request I've ever received in the history of Patreon next up here, which is me and Matt do a collab video in which we make a complete Christmas dinner with a minimum of 3 courses, without personal injury, destruction of kitchen equipment, and no fires. The dinner must be approved by Claire. Okay, that's a really specific thing you just asked for. And you know I only do cooking once a year on the anniversary. And I've never done cooking with Matt. Where did this idea come from? John, how should humanity feel about the fact that even though Useless Steve is relatively useless in a Fallout universe context, he would still outperform the majority of people on Earth when it comes to survivability? Probably pretty bad, to be honest, yes. Though then again, I suppose though this was kind of a joke, it does sort of stumble on something which I would like to at some point see fixed in Fallout, which is, even if you deliberately make yourself as bad as possible in Fallout, you're still at least modestly capable at all things. You can still carry around an okay amount of weight. You can still reasonably well aim a gun and use VATS and craft and diddly-diddly-dee. And I find that a bit sad. I always felt like, you know, Fallout could do with getting back to how things were a little bit more in classic Fallout, Fallout 1 and 2, where if you had a special stat of 1, you were truly abysmal. It really crippled your ability to actually function using that particular stat. So I would like to see that going forward, where special of 1 is really a serious problem. John, is Crusader Kings 3 more friendly to new players than Crusader Kings 2? Yes, 100%, absolutely, no question whatsoever. Because 1, there is a better tutorial, and in the game, the UI and the tooltips are so much more useful. So, yes, I think it's like basically an objective fact that Crusader Kings 3 is more friendly to new players. John, how can you love octopuses but hate jellyfish when, if you think about it, octopuses are really just big jellyfish? You shut your mouth. Alright, you shut your mouth and then open it again so I may insert the soap to wash your mouth out, which you will then close again with the soap still inside so you can swill the soap in order to better clean out your mouth. How dare you? How dare you? Alright, jellyfish are just bags of creepy, stinging stuff. They are dumb. They are basically barely even sentient. Octopuses are incredibly intelligent. They recognize things. They exhibit play behavior. They utilize tools. They are so damn smart. They're like monkey level smart. They are so intelligent. I love them. And how dare you? John, have you had a chance to try the M&S Spiced Ice Buns yet? No, I haven't actually been to M&S for a few days. I completely forgot about that. Though, weird coincidence, I was chatting to my mum the other day, and she did out of nowhere mention M&S Spiced Ice Buns, so apparently she just really likes them. Also, rather embarrassingly, one person offered to send us a free Blue Yeti microphone so that we can get Claire properly mic'd up for the live streams. We've already got a Blue Yeti mic for Claire that the business bought specifically for her. We just then spent the next year failing to figure out how to properly plug it in such a way as would allow us to use it without there being like, you know, a weird echo or double sound or like feedback or anything, just because I'm completely technically inept, basically. John, on August 22nd, Juicehead made a video with a theory that the big undiscovered Fallout 4 secret that Todd Howard has mentioned is that the player is in fact a synth. Now, okay, fine, there is an interesting bit of evidence that you can use VATS before you pick up a Pip-Boy, which is mentioned on a terminal for the Gen 3 synths, but like, it's not a secret that the player might be a synth. If you play Far Harbor, Dima literally says, "Hey, have you considered that you might be a synth?" And you can reply, "Well, yes, I actually might be, that's true." So, I feel like that can't be it, because, like, it can't be a secret if one of the main quest givers of one of only 2 big narrative DLCs says to you, "Hey, have you considered this?" So, it's a perfectly viable theory. In fact, yes, I believe there's very good evidence to potentially support it in some capacity. It's just not a secret because it's made too obvious to you. Also, if it's not this, then what is it? Honestly, I do not know. I mean, if I had to guess, it might well be something in one of the votes, because the votes, like, are a little bit bland in Fallout 4, especially next to New Vegas, and arguably next to 3 as well. So, maybe there's something hidden away in one of the votes that's just been sort of, overlooked. I don't know. Question for Claire. Which Tyranid Mini is your favourite? Oh, that's a fun question.
You know, I love all the really big monsters with like claws and tentacles and like a million ridges on their backs and stuff. The ones that are like, you buy a single mini in a pack and it's quite expensive just for this one mini, and it's relatively big for a thing that you're going to like really focus on and paint. But if I had to choose a favorite miniature, and in particular something that's like more of the regular army type of mini, I would probably say a zoanthrope, just because like I love the fact that you get to paint their brains in like neon colors. It's a ridiculous reason to pick them, but like they have this cool like, I'm an alien snack and my brain is showing and I'm going to blast you dead. And I just love them.
John, how the heck have you not played Age of Mythology yet? Well, Canada's bacon. The problem is, there are like probably hundreds of thousands of video games in the world, and I can only make so many flipping videos. Leave me alone, Canada's bacon. Stop bullying me. Okay, fuck, marry, kill. Where fuck is I get to play it once, marry is I own it forever, kill it's never released. The options are Bethesda developed Fallout set in Seattle with adorable sea otters, Bethesda developed Fallout in and around London with the British Museum, Obsidian developed Fallout set in and around Toronto featuring a faction of Mounties. Okay, well you made that one easy. So marry the Obsidian Fallout in and around Toronto, obviously, in which case... Ooh, that's tricky. You know what, I'll go for fuck the Bethesda in London, just because I feel like I could probably contribute more to that Fallout game talking about it in London and what's in London than I could to Seattle. Because I like Seattle, but I've only been there like, a few times and spent a handful of months there, once or twice. So I wouldn't be able to comment in great detail on the stuff in Seattle. Whereas London, I'd be able to do a better job as a commentator. Ooh, straight to another fuck, marry, kill, but this time more literally. Sunny Smiles, Moira, and Veronica from New Vegas, of course. Ooh, that's tricky. That's tricky. That's really tricky, actually. You see, the thing is, my initial response is, okay, kill Sunny Smiles, because she's a much more minor character. But I feel bad for Sunny Smiles. Like, Sunny Smiles doesn't get enough credit, because Sunny Smiles is good, reliable, dependable. She keeps Good Spring safe, damn it. She seems like a good egg. So it feels harsh just to, toss her onto the bus because she's got less lines of dialogue than Moira or Veronica. So... Oh, that's really tricky. That's really, really tricky. Okay. You know what? No, I'm gonna do it. Right, so we're gonna kill Moira, because, fine, she's cute and she's got some good turns of phrase, but sooner or later, one of her experiments for her book is going to get you killed. So it's easier and safer to kill her before she kills you. Then what we'll do is we'll fuck Veronica, because her heart obviously belongs to Christine, so I couldn't get between them in the long term. And I'm gonna marry Sunny Smiles and settle down in Good Springs, alright? We're gonna raise big horners together, it's going to be beautiful. John, any chance we could see some smaller or shorter games on the Wednesday livestream vote? Sometimes it feels like it's dominated by larger titles. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's something I'd never even considered before. So, okay, fair enough. That's very interesting feedback. That's very good feedback, because that's just something I didn't even think about. So, okay, that's what we're going to do. Going forward, next time we do a Wednesday vote, I'm going to try and keep in mind that, one of the two things I should try and balance is a small game can be balanced against a big game. Though admittedly, the big game might... Okay, maybe that wouldn't work. Maybe we'd need to have a week where it was going to be a small game, where two smaller games were balanced against each other for the sake of fairness, because a bigger game's probably going to have more widespread appeal, so it would win the vote easily. So, Okay, you've given me some food for thought there. Thank you for that. I'm going to keep that in mind and have a think about how to make that work. John, was there any time since you've had Crusader Kings 3 that you almost revealed or talked about something but caught yourself at the last moment? Fortunately not, because I've been doing this long enough and I've been dealing with NDAs for long enough that these days, when I've signed something saying I can't talk about something, it comes as second nature, and I can reliably trust myself not to ruin that, live or anything. Apart from that one time we accidentally broke the streaming embargo for Bad North, live, and had to email the devs to apologise. But that was just one time. Also, what about the game was the hardest thing not to talk about? Oh, that's tricky. Probably the lifestyle system, like, in detail, which is why the moment I could talk about the game, I released, like, an hour and a half long guide to it, because I find it a really damn interesting system. John, regarding Crusader Kings, any chance of a big multiplayer community event? Now, the barrier to a big Paradox community event is, yes, the more people you get, the more frequent the disconnects are, because everything gets a bit unsynced and it all goes a bit wrong. So I feel like, unfortunately, yes, big Paradox multiplayer events are just a bit unstable for community play days, unfortunately. John, any interest in Cyanide and Happiness Freak Apocalypse? The game is coming out soon. Now, I do enjoy the odd Cyanide and Happiness, though I don't know anything about the game, and sometimes I'm a little suspicious of, like, webcomics or video series just making a spin-off game, because I'm suspicious it's just going to be nothing but in-jokes and references rather than a game. So really it's just more of like, an interactive meme. Now, hopefully that's not the case. So I'll have to look into that when we get closer to it. Also, have you ever looked into West of Loathing? Yes! In fact, I've done about a 95% complete run of it, because we did I think it was 2 or 3 videos, then a live stream, and then the live stream I got to almost the end of the game, but then couldn't find the final bloody location, so as a result of that, it's 95% done. But there's not enough left to do another live stream, but it would be really weird to just do a random out-of-nowhere ending video to it now, so I don't know. Yes is the answer. But now you've said it, next Patroncast, 3 people are going to be, John, why don't you finish off West of Loathing? I don't know. I just don't know, people. There's too many games. John, any interest in playing Star Dynasties? Yes, I've heard good things. Like you say, a bit like, Stellaris meets Crusader Kings. It does sound very, very fun indeed. So, 100%, yes, I would like to look at that at some point. John, I saw Claire's Twitter post about Tabby meeting another cat, a kitten. In fact, it was the kitten of a friend of ours. How did it go? Surprisingly well. We thought Tabby was going to be scared or aggressive, running away or hissing. Tabby was just chill as anything. Her ears didn't go down, she didn't puff up her tail. She just sort of sat there. And the kitten walked right up to her and booped noses with her. And Tabby was just like, yep, that's a small cat. I am completely calm with this situation. And we both thought she was going to react worse than that. So, yeah, that means next time we move, so we've got a bit of a bigger place with an actual garden, yeah, it's puppy and kitten time, damn it. John, in the Fate Tactics video, you mentioned how important Final Fantasy Tactics Advance was to young John. Have you ever played its predecessor, Final Fantasy Tactics? No, because that was PS1, wasn't it? Back in those days, I had Nintendo consoles. So I had the Super NES, then the N64, then the GameCube. So I never had the chance to play the original Final Fantasy Tactics. I only played Advance. John, what was your favourite part of the birthday livestream? Well, my favourite bit of live streams is always when things that are completely unplanned happen. So, the fact that Claire decided to randomly go for big guns, and as a result of that, yes, we started using the rocket launcher for everything. And the rocket launcher started carrying us through the game, which I've never really tried doing before. That was just fun. That was great fun. So, yeah, the fact we ended up using a completely unconventional build was brilliant. John, are you planning on doing any videos with the new Tony Hawk Pro Skater remake? I probably really shouldn't, because I've literally never played a skating game, and I don't know anything about skating. So I feel like, 1, I'd be terrible, and 2, to anyone who actually, likes skating games, it would just be painful. So probably best I don't, to be honest. John, as we all know in Fallout 3, your dad isn't James, he's Liam Neeson. Are there any other characters you always refer to by the actor's name? Not precisely, but kind of like a sideways similar thing. Whenever I run into Garrus in Fallout 4, I always call him Garrus, because yes, that voice actor is basically just doing pretty much the Garrus voice. So I always just call him Garrus, though I don't actually know the name of the voice actor himself. John, why'd you call all vacuum cleaners Hoovers? That's just because idiomatically in the UK, Hoover means any sort of vacuum cleaner, even if it's not part of the Hoover brand. So you might well call a Dyson a Hoover, even though it's not a Hoover. Sorry, that's just a weird quirk of English. John, how would you feel about the Fallout TV series focusing a series each on a select area, like say the NCR, Capital Wasteland, etc.? Interesting idea, but the problem with that is it means you'd have no continuity, so all the characters you've got, like, attached to in one series wouldn't show up in the next, which might make the series feel very disconnected and lead to a lot of people dropping off after, the first episode of Season 2, when they realise, hey, none of those characters I liked are in it, so now the show's totally different, so I'm just going to walk away now. So, I mean, it's an interesting idea, but I feel like it wouldn't necessarily work for maintaining your audience. John, a simple one for you this month. How tall are you? I don't know precisely, because I'm not sure, how I would know that. I'm somewhere around 5'9"-ish, but, I'm not sure precisely, because why would I know my own height? Why does anybody know their own height? John, what's your favourite cake flavour? Oh, it does vary. Sometimes I'm into chocolate, sometimes I'm into coffee, sometimes lemon and, Madeira is lovely. Bakewell is spectacular. I can't pick one. Don't make me pick. I won't. I refuse. Recommendation for Iron Harvest, which apparently is already out. I had no bloody clue. I thought that wasn't out for ages yet, but I saw an ad for it recently that said out now, so I guess it must be. But yes, it does look sort of cute with its massive stompy robot, so no guarantee, but at some point, yes, I would like to look at that one. John, best moment in The Simpsons that's not steamed hams. It's gotta be, that's the joke. I say that's the joke all the time. I love that tiny moment, it's wonderful. John, this might be a bit contentious, but how much do you think trotting out the old "it had a very short development time" for New Vegas is used to shift the blame for any fault from Obsidian over to Bethesda? Now that's interesting. That's very, very interesting indeed, but I don't think it's an excuse that is overused, because when you bear in mind factoring in, the various contractual stuff and the fact it was made back in the days when a game needed to, be locked down a certain period before launch to actually go on physical discs, because that was in the days when, if you bought a disc, the actual game was on it, not just a file telling your console to download the game, because bloody hell, we live in a nightmare apparently. Yes indeed, they didn't have much time at all, it was probably under 18 months that New Vegas was produced in, maybe not even much over a year. And when you factor in how much they were able to do in that window of a year to a year and a half, and you consider how long much smaller, less ambitious games that are much less interesting can spend in development, 2 to 3 years easily. Never mind the planning stage that doesn't even get counted when we typically say how long a game takes to make, the pre-planning stage. Yeah, I think it is a perfectly reasonable excuse that isn't overused at all. And the fact it's as good as it is quite frankly a miracle and a testament to the genius of the people involved. John, you mentioned during your Fallout 4 Survival series you'd like to have a video playing all of the holotape games. Do you still have that desire? No, because I already did. I'm pretty confident I did. Was it, maybe it was just the Ruby Ruins, but I'm pretty sure I did look at all of them. There is a 2-part video that looks at all of the Pip-Boy games, so I have already done that, yes. Also, did you ever get the massive Sheep Squatch plushie, or was the season grind too much? It was too much. I was happy to let the plushie pass me by, sadly. It was just way too much for me. I just couldn't bring myself to do more in the way of grinding just for a couple of items in 76. Ooh, fuck, marry, kill, many a true nerd cubed matophobia. Okay, that one's easy. Marry Matt, because Matt would be the best husband, because he's such a nice guy. Fuck many a true nerd, because who doesn't want to have a brief sexual experience with a clone of themselves? Obviously, everybody does. And then kill Dan, because, sorry, but just by default. John, how do you balance making money with making things you want to make? Okay, that one's easy. I just overwhelmingly prioritise making the things I want to make, and then sort of just hope that the making money logically follows. Because if I'm making stuff I don't care about, no one's going to care about it, and that's going to be really bad for the health of the channel in the long term. But if I make stuff I love, then logically that's going to show through, and people are going to be excited about stuff, because I'm excited about stuff. And that will hopefully logically follow to the money taking care of itself. So basically I just massively wait, make the stuff I want to make, and then just sort of hope, actually. After that, everything else is kind of gravy. Like, you mentioned a couple of extra things, like, merchandise. As you can tell, we've been very relaxed about that. We never push it. There's barely any merchandising at all. Patreon tiers, like, yeah, we could make that way more aggressive. We could, like, say, okay, actually, if you want to, like, leave a question for the Patroncast, you've got to give $5 or something. But no, I don't like that. I just like to think if anyone gives anything at all, they should be treated equally. And sponsorships, my general rule is I'll only accept money to do a video if I probably would have done it anyway, even if they hadn't offered me money. That's kind of the trick. Don't tell the publishers that, though. If they realise, they'll just start offering me code first before they offer me money. But, like, that's pretty much my golden rule. I'll only do a sponsored video if I would have done it even if they weren't paying me. That's kind of the golden rule for how I do that sort of thing. John, would you ever consider doing a matriarchal run in Crusader Kings? Now, I don't know whether you mean trying to keep nothing but women on the throne under the normal rule set, or whether you mean actually turning on, like, matriarchy mode, which you can now do in the options of Crusader Kings 3. So I don't know which you mean there. The first is possibly so difficult as to be impossible, just because yeah, like, the women are going to be constantly bumped to the back of the succession queue, just because for a long time in the game you're not going to be able to change some of the preferences, whereas in the second it would just be playing the game as normal, but there's going to be way more women than men in positions of power, so not 100% sure either works for me. Okay, here's a conspiracy theory I didn't know about. So in The Last of Us 2, the bracelet theory. So, when Ellie's in Santa Barbara, she doesn't have Dina's bracelet on, but she does when she goes back to the farmhouse. And it's empty inside, implying she did in fact see Dina. They may still be together. Okay, that's interesting. I completely missed that. So, in which case, if that was true, why did Ellie go back to the farmhouse and then, like, immediately leave again? And it's not like because she wanted to gather her belongings, because she left all her belongings there. So, okay, I need to think about that, but I'm not 100% sure that makes sense to me. Also, I was wondering what your thoughts were about what should be the plot for the third game. Okay, I was talking to Claire about this. So, the third game should be set 15 years in the future, where we're playing as a 16-year-old JJ. Now, this is important, because this means we would now be 40 years after Apocalypse Day. And bearing in mind that with less nutrition and healthcare and electricity and refrigeration and diddly-diddly-dee, lifespans are going to be shorter. So, if we're about 40 years after Apocalypse Day, we're going to be getting to the stage when the last few people who were already adults, i.e., got good educations, had vocational training, learnt complex technical skills that they could take forward into the apocalypse, are starting to die off of ill health and old age. And that's going to be very, very interesting, because that means there's going to be a period when huge amounts of knowledge is going to be lost, because the people who are practitioners of that knowledge are going to be passing away without a particularly reliable way for them to recreate the training that gave them said knowledge. They can pass on certain, vocational hints, but knowledge is going to start being lost extremely fast. It's going to be one of the big things that happens when that generation is done passing away. And that's also going to lead into a really fascinating new era where the only people who were alive before the apocalypse and have memories of before the apocalypse are going to have been children at the time. So their memories might be inaccurate, fuzzy, incomplete, prone to mistakes or whatnot. So yeah, I think that could be really, really interesting. A look at, how 16-year-old JJ, how he kind of views the world, what he thinks about the world, in a world where the people who were adults when the world ended are starting to pass on, the people who were children when the world ended are still around, but the majority of people in the world at this point, because of course the longer we go on in time, the greater the proportion of people who weren't around when the world ended. So the apocalypse is all they've ever known. Like, that demographic is going to start shifting. And by the time we get to JJ being a teenager, they're going to easily be in the majority at that point. So then we can start playing with all sorts of ideas for, okay, how do we preserve knowledge? What knowledge is being lost? And that's very, very tragic indeed. But how does society remember the world before the apocalypse? Are people starting to make up stories and lies? And for what reason? And what would that do to society? The fact that everyone's forgetting what the old world used to be like. Now that I think could be a really good dark place to kick off a story. That could be really, really fun. It could be all about identity and communal memory and how we view society. It's all very interesting. I think it could be really cool. John, do you ever get stressed about coming up with new runs for Fallout? Honestly, no. Because, like, every time I feel like, oh, you know what, I'm kind of running out of stuff to do in Fallout, I just immediately come up with something else. So I'm very confident I'll keep coming up with bits and pieces. Like, you know, Useless Steve needs to at some point visit Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. At some point, they'll totally remaster Fallout 3, so I can do, like, you know, a Fallout 3 complete survival run of some description. I've never even done a full series of Tactics or Brotherhood of Steel on the channel, so at some point I could get round to doing them just for a bit of fun. Fallout 4 You Only Live Once is, of course, about to begin. There is a completely different rule set that I have actually dreamt up that would work in Fallout 3, New Vegas, and Fallout 4 that I've never discussed in detail before, but I do have it in mind, so I'm really not worried. I have got enough stuff to keep me going for years into the future yet. Recommendation for AI Dungeon. Yes, I'd heard Dan and Matt talking about this, so I don't know much about it, but it does sound rather fun, so I might well have to give that one a look-see, yes. John, I noticed your videos are always light and upbeat. My question is that a conscious decision? Yes, it is. How do you manage that when you're having a bad day? Honestly, if I'm feeling lousy, I just can't record. So I just need to, at that point, like, you know, do some editing or do some planning or look at the calendar and rearrange it to try and optimize it a bit. So I just try and, you know, record when I'm in a decent mood. But when you've also been, like, you know, doing this as long as I have, you can get yourself into a good mood. Like, you know, some people find, like, going for a run makes them happy. I can find that sitting down to record itself inherently makes me happy. So even if I'm just having, like, an okay day, just the action of sitting down and recording and putting together a video perks me up a bit. So, like, I get happier by virtue of doing the thing where I have to be happy to do it. So, like, it's like a catch-23, I suppose, because it's a virtuous good catch-22. How long till the Surgeon Simulator 2 collab video? Haven't discussed it with Dan or Matt yet, but 100% yes, soon-ish. John, I was watching HBO's Rome and noticed during one of the early scenes that when the Senate is arguing about Caesar, half the Senate cheers him, the other half jeers. This made me wonder, was the Senate split into political parties? Kind of, but, like, not in the modern sense where there was any permanent allegiance whatsoever. Instead, there tended to be well-respected senior statesmen that had certain general views, like, you know, I am pro-aristocracy, or I am more pro-the people. Okay, that's a really massive oversimplification, but just go with me here. And generally, less well-established senators would kind of, you know, stick into those groups, though these will be slightly fluid groups and might lose people backwards and forwards. Generally, this was a good idea, though, for, you know, people's own protection. Because if you were known to be so-and-so's man, then if anyone decided they wanted to just, you know, get rid of you, toss some accusations at you, tie you up in lawsuits or whatever, then that guy, knowing that you were one of his, could intercede on your behalf, which could be very, very useful indeed, because a lot politically in Rome was just done with a quick wink and a nod, rather than, like, you know, the official way it probably ought to have been done. So, yes, there were political parties in a way, but they were unofficial. Thoughts, knowledge and experience with the Diablo series, basically non-existent. I've played a tiny bit of 3 with an old friend of mine, but other than that, none whatsoever. John, assuming no language issues, how might a Roman or Greek citizen fare in a Fallout setting? What if a Greek or Roman city was transported into said setting? Probably they wouldn't do well, because there's a lot of guns dodged about, and not one person present would be, familiar with said guns. So I feel like they'd struggle in that regard, as is the fact that, radiation is everywhere, but it's also invisible, and they would have no idea what radiation is or how to sort it out. So I feel like they're gonna die very fast. John, love the grounded multiplayer. Could you put together a live stream with Matt? Okay, not sure about a live stream. I think, live streams are good, collabs are good. Collab live streams might be a bit much, in a way. Unless the entire point is, something like the Podcast, where it's more like a chat show, where we just happen to also be playing a game. I do agree the world needs more Matt, though. Matt is a good guy. Controversial fuck, marry, kill. Joel, Ellie, and Abby. Okay, so I've got an idea, which is what we're gonna do, given the events of The Last of Us 2, is we're gonna kill Ellie and Abby, and we're gonna both fuck and marry Joel, because older Joel seems to have chilled out a flipping lot and just enjoys playing his guitar. Damn it. And we know for a fact that both Ellie and Abby are one bad day away from spiralling into a mad murderous revenge cycle. So we're just going to kill both of them, save ourselves the trouble, and hang out with our new husband, Guitar Joel. John, have you ever done any work with the YouTuber Quill18? No, I know of his work, but I don't think we've ever spoken, aside from possibly during the Imperator thing. Was he in the Imperator thing? I can't remember. I know of him, but we've never spoken, so nothing's on the cards. One for Claire. Have you ever read any of the science fiction novels by the author C.J. Cherryh? One of my favourites. Sorry, I've just probably mispronounced that surname, by the way. One of my favourites. Sorry if you've covered this on your own channel. Over to Claire, who can tell me how that ought to be pronounced.
Now, as far as I'm aware, John, that's exactly how you pronounce C.J. Cherryh. I've not read any of her books before, because I don't tend to read a lot of classics, but I am definitely interested in classics by women, so if you have any recommendations for any CJ Cherryh books to read or anything in that kind of vein, do let me know. I'm interested.
Okay, fuck, marry, kill, where fuck means you have it one day a month, and marry means you have it all the time, and it can't be taken away or destroyed, and kill means you can't use it, instead it's gifted to my worst enemy, who will use it all the time and rub it in my face. I'm sure Matt wouldn't do that, but okay, apparently he would for the purposes of this situation. So, perfectly silent air conditioning installation that can keep your whole place as cool as the inside of a refrigerator, even in the worst heat wave. Okay, that's good. Wardrobe with a secret garden inside, with lots of space for a dog to run around in and play in, a la Narnia or the TARDIS, or a Steam account that can play any game released up to a year in the future. Oh, okay, this is tricky. Now, the problem with the Steam account is, sure, I'd have access to it, but I wouldn't be able to actually make videos, because, the people would realise what I was doing and they'd just copyright strike the video, then I'd just lose the channel. So, that doesn't actually help me. Now, the wardrobe would let me have a puppy, which is pretty exciting, so that's pretty darn good. The air conditioning unit, one day a month. But then again, it's not that hot all the time. Okay, I will marry the wardrobe, so my dog can go in the wardrobe every day, and thus I can have a dog immediately. I'll leave the Steam account, because it's probably a good way of getting my channel deleted, and I'll have the air conditioning unit one day a month, and I will simply keep that one day for whenever there's a heat wave, which in the UK is not that often. Boom. John, I love runs like The Worst Courier or The Time You Broke Rome Total War. Any chance of anything more like that? I have nothing on the docket right now, because honestly, finding ways to completely break games is not the most common thing in the world. But, if I do come across something like that, no reason why I wouldn't, I just don't know when it's next gonna happen. John, which game that you featured do you feel is the most inaccurate in terms of its depiction of the classical world? It's got to be Rise, Son of Rome, for the simple reason that they had Emperor Nero as an old man who was in Rome while it was being invaded by barbarians from Britain, led by Boudica, who was riding an elephant. So basically every word in that sentence is wrong and I hate it. I hate it so much. John, if you were a blue rogue pirate captain in Skies of Arcadia, with Claire and Tabby as your crew, what would your flag design be? Ooh, I'll go for an owl, but like a stylized owl, like you get on the back of Athenian coins, where they've got those ridiculously massive eyes. I'll go for one of them. And another recommendation for Ghost of Tsushima, which I definitely need to look at some point. I've heard some really good things. And a second recommendation for Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon, which I might well play at some point, but that was... they were 3DS, right? Because if so, I don't really know how I'd record that, because I don't actually have like one of those specially modified 3DSs, so I'd need to actually get like specialized hardware for that. And even then, like, the image would be quite small, and like you have to do weird things because it doesn't fit inside, you know, a standard 16:9 rectangle. So you've got to like have things filling the gaps, and it's a lot of setup. I might just wait for the next Switch game. Screw it, bring on Pokemon Snap 2. We'll have more Pokemon when Pokemon Snap 2 shows up. John, have you managed to watch The Last Airbender yet? No, but Claire really wants to kind of rewatch it. She seems sort of interested in me watching this for the first time. So at some point we will catch the first few episodes, hopefully before next month. John, what's the most interesting start you've seen so far in Crusader Kings 3? Honestly, it's the one I went for in the series that began yesterday, just because I really do feel like, you know, the last tiny dying embers of pagan Vikings in 1066 is such a cool starting location, so I just loved it as soon as I found it and started digging into it and reading about the history of it, so yeah, that's why I made that the series, because it was the most interesting start I could find on the entire map. Also, how was the cake from the Crusader Kings 3 sponsored video? Okay, I'm going to tell you a secret now. I'm going to tell you a secret. You're not allowed to repeat this. So, the thing is, I didn't have time to bake, like, 4 or 5 separate cakes for that video, because I was in a rush that week, because there was a lot of other stuff to do for Crusader Kings 3. But I knew I couldn't use store-bought cakes, because it would be obvious. So, what I did was I went and bought 4 store-bought cakes. I literally peeled the icing, like really crappy thick fondant, like off the top. And then I bought 2 big tubs of like ready to spread icing. And then I just spread icing round the outside of the now naked cakes. But I did it slightly messily. So when you put them next to each other, it would look like a terribly badly made cake that I had just made. But those were in fact store-bought cakes with just extra icing smeared on the top. So it looked like I just made them. It was all a lie. I'm so sorry. John, if Ashley was a character in Mass Effect 2, would you have done her loyalty mission? Yes, I probably would have done. Just because I like going on a suicide mission and then having literally everyone survive. Like it would bug me if one person died in the suicide mission, even if it was Ashley. So I guess I would do, I suppose. John, a fuck, marry, kill for Claire! Okay, Claire, you have to choose fuck, marry, kill between Evil John, American John, and Normal John, but he's singing Skater Boy forever. Oh, that's a good one.
Now, on the face of it, this one is pretty easy because, you know, obviously I'm going to marry regular John who sings Skater Boy forever because, you know, that it's not that different from my everyday regular life, and I pretty much love my everyday regular life with John being his regular ridiculous self. So that's the easy bet. And then probably I should murder Evil John because he's evil and, you know, fuck American John kind of by default. But I do have to say I don't think the accent is, like, hot or anything like that. So that is definitely a by default kind of a choice.
John, how much delay has this question caused to Fallout 4 You Only Yo-Yo Once? Another week. It's been pushed back another week and it's all your fault, Steve. John, I'm considering Stellaris for the Xbox One. Would you recommend it? If you only have a console, yes, I think it's a pretty darn good port. However, if you do have the option to play it on PC, I would recommend PC above console every time. It's definitely easier with a keyboard and mouse, but it is eminently playable on console, yes. John, which of these is scariest to you? And you've provided names for me to look up, like a particular type of jellyfish, particular type of Venus flytrap, different type of jellyfish. I'm not falling for it. I'm not doing it. I refuse. I'm not looking those up. However, the generic question seems to be, am I more scared of jellyfish or Venus flytraps? Jellyfish are at the top, because in theory, they could follow me in the water, whereas I know Venus flytraps are rooted to the ground and don't, move that fast. So that's relatively okay, alright? Jellyfish are worse. I'm not looking up the images of those particular jellyfish, though, because I won't be able to sleep tonight. John, what's your top 5 games you were introduced to by viewers requesting you play them? Oh, that's interesting. Factorio's amazing. That was from requests. Subnautica was really good fun. That was from requests, and one day that will be a full series in 2021. Dragon Age Origins, which of course I played for a bit in that live stream. That has been a regular request as well. So those 3 feel like they're towards the top. I can't think of another 2 that are very prominent right now, but those are the top 3 that come to mind immediately. John, what are some of the most interesting mechanics you've seen in the game that just didn't quite work out right? Like a good idea with improper or unrefined implementation. Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, I guess the most prominent example that comes to mind out of the games I know really well would be hardcore mode in Fallout New Vegas, where it just felt really not well balanced, for the simple reason that, it introduces the need to eat, sleep, and drink. But food and water and beds are plentiful, so it just becomes a faff. To the extent that when Josh Sawyer released his own personal mod, he completely kind of tried to rebalance that a little bit. I think he realised it just didn't work correctly. It just feels like something that was tossed in at the last second. They just did not have time to properly test it. John, I truly believe Fallout 4 is the greatest installment in the whole Fallout series. Is Fallout 4 better than I think? Oh, I see what you're doing. Look, just hold off soon, alright? Really soon. Interesting question here about, yes, exactly what I do when I'm playing a game. Specifically, in some games, I play seriously, if I like. Whereas in other games and other videos, for example, say, Microsoft Flight Simulator, I would say is a faff video. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't see these 2 things as, a dichotomy. I mean, it would be interesting for me to kind of, go back and just kind of, look over a month and say, okay, that was a serious video, that was a faff video. I don't see these things as kind of, countering each other, though. Because, what exactly is playing a game seriously? Because a game you're supposed to be having fun. And for me, sometimes the most fun I can get out of a game, and the most way I can turn footage of a game into something that's fun to watch, is through not necessarily playing the game, correctly or seriously, but by, doing what entertains me in what creates a bit more of a faff video. I would say absolutely probably the series represent more serious, because I'm trying to complete the game. I'm trying to move forward in the game a certain amount. Whereas the one-offs, because I know unless I choose to make it a series, because the reaction to it is incredible, it's going to be a one-off. Therefore, I don't need to rush to make a certain amount of progress, because we're probably not going to get to the end of the game regardless, unless it's very, very short indeed, or unless I choose to bring it back as live stream, mini-series, whatever. Therefore, I just do whatever I think is going to make the most entertaining video. Now, for some people, that's going to look like I'm faffing about. So, honestly, that's kind of just a thing I've been doing for about 7 years at this point. So, if one-offs occasionally featuring a bit of faff, because that's the best way to make, a video out of what I've got in front of me, doesn't work for you, then unfortunately, I think that's just going to not work for you. But hopefully, you enjoy the actual running series on Monday, Friday, and Sundays. Because they tend to have more of an actual, sense of progression and seriousness to them, if you like. John, having watched your video on the skill trees in Crusader Kings 3, I think you might have underestimated how good stress reduction is. I might have done, The thing is, having only put 60 hours into the game at this point, I'm not going to know everything. I'm going to have, an okay-ish high-level understanding of the core basic mechanics, but it's a Paradox game, so we're going to be learning. Now, maybe I just got lucky, but the characters I've played as so far, it has not proven difficult at all to keep stress nice and low, even when I've never taken a perk pertaining to getting stressed down. Now, other characters, where everyday actions that you're going to want to do as part of managing your empire stress you out, possibly, at that point, yeah, you might find yourself in a situation where then you do need those perks. So I mean, like everything in Crusader Kings 2, it's really situational, and depending on what your character is like, it's gonna vary massively. And maybe I should have stressed that more clearly when I was making the video. Also, as a follow-up question, how much have I played with Catholicism? Not so much, I'm afraid, so you would know better than me on the power of realm priests and their relationships with the Pope. I have not dug into that much myself so far. Now here's a really interesting suggestion on how to get into Crusader Kings. So, someone suggesting maybe a multiplayer game where the person who was new to the game played as, like, you know, a count in the same, like, duchy or kingdom as a liege who's played by someone who's more experienced at the game. That's actually not a bad idea. I'd probably go for Count to King, where the new person is playing as a count who is reporting directly to the king. So take out the Duke stage, because that way, if you get attacked, you've got, like, you know, the full might of the kingdom behind your partner to protect you, whereas on the other hand, you can be confident, unless you think your partner's about to be a dick, that yes, they're actually going to not revoke your title any time. So, yeah, actually, that'll probably be a nice, safe way to learn the game if you wanted. John, a few weeks back somebody made a comment in the subreddit about healthy masculine role models, which you then went on to tweet. Could you read that out in case some patrons missed it? Yes, let me just dig that out. Here we go. This is someone who, sent me a message saying that what they liked about the channel was your wholesomeness, your unapologetic love for cuteness, for caring, for love, for intellectualism, for calm and peace instead of mindless noise. In a culture dominated by toxic masculinity, you really come across as a role model, a reassurance that all of the above are okay things for a man to hold on to. Now, I was really touched by that. I was really genuinely very touched by that. That mattered a lot to me, because none of those are things that, like, I've ever sat down and said, yes, today I shall ensure that my channel is a model of healthy masculinity in which men know that it's okay to like cute things or whatever. Like, I've never sat down and planned, like, any of that. Like, none of this was ever part of a plan. The whole channel is just, like, you know, me being me and me being, like, a happy version of me as best I can. Because, as I say earlier, like, you know, I feel like I have to be in a positive mood because I like the videos to be positive. But, like, when you just do something every day, where all you do is you be you. And that means, you know, putting yourself out there. Like, you know, I put a lot of myself out there into the world. And, like, I never really plan too much, to be honest. Never really plan anything, for the most part. I just sort of go with it. Like, aside from the essays, nothing's scripted, nothing's planned. I just sort of load up a game, go, and hope it turns out well in the end. And if it doesn't, well, we can edit it until it's at least okay. So, like, when I do that, and, like, someone says to me, hey, actually, like, I think you're a really good role model for healthy masculinity, and I really like that you are wholesome and intellectual and calm and peaceful, aside from, you know, like, some roleplay videos where that's the point, you're not supposed to be, that's fine. But, you know, I take that as a very personal compliment, just because, you know, that means me just being me is a thing that some people look at and find helpful and maybe even inspiring in some capacity. And yeah, that really touched me. That mattered a lot to me. I really enjoyed that. John, if you were to balance the Crusader Kings 3 perk trees, would you weaken the strongest trees or vice versa? No, I would strengthen up some of the weaker trees. So Seduction in particular, I think, needs a little bit of work. That one needs a bit of work. Whole of Body could do with a bit of a tweak, I'd say. Overseer could be more generally useful. Architect should do everything it does right now, but, like, you could literally double the strength of just about everything in that tree, and it still wouldn't be too powerful. I don't know why Architect feels, like, so modest. I feel like it should be way better than it is. So, yeah, I would definitely kind of strengthen up the weaker trees. I don't feel like any tree feels broken powerful, though I guess you could argue, if you're playing as a tribe, August is, like, so good, like, you'd probably want to always take it. So that might be a bit too good, potentially. I might just slightly nudge down August. Oh, it's a follow-up recommendation for 5-dimensional chess, which I just cannot get my head around. So, okay, more videos for me to look into. I'll try and figure this one out, but no promises, because seriously, just looking at this thing makes my head hurt. And for Claire, who apparently last month did note that she likes stories about ancient and powerful beings that don't even care about humans, a few follow-up recommendations in the genre of cosmic horror. So, Colour Out of Space, movie starring Nick Cage, or Made in Abyss, manga with an anime adaptation. Honorary mention, John Carpenter's The Thing, though a bit more body horror than cosmic horror. So okay, Claire will hear those recommendations when she edits this together. John, now you finished The Last of Us, how do you feel about the final cutscene between Joel and Ellie? Now, I have a bit of a problem with that cutscene, which is the idea that Ellie ultimately decides to show mercy because she remembers that, positive things and trying to forgive even when someone's done something that you really hate them for is a thing Joel tried to encourage her to do and a thing that Joel inspired her to do. Now, that's good. That I like, but there's a problem, which is there's no reason given why Ellie remembered that particular thing right at that moment. Like, Ellie knew the entire game that, she was trying to forgive Joel. That they were moving on a path to forgiveness. There's no reason during the final confrontation she remembered that then, but she didn't remember it previously. Like, this was not new information, and nothing happened during that scene that reminded her about that. Like, say, if Lev had just, got himself out of the boat and said a particular phrasing that reminded her of something that Joel said, that would have made at least a bit more sense. But, given nothing happens, it's just Ellie is trying to murder Abby, then she remembers the thing that she knew all along, and thus she decides to spare Abby. It feels a bit manipulative, because it's new information to us, the audience, but it's not new information to Ellie. She knew that the whole time. Why didn't she think that when she was deciding whether or not to leave the farmhouse to pursue Abby further? Why didn't she think of that when she was leaving to go to Seattle in the first place? Though I guess you could argue she kind of had to go because Tommy already went, so at that point she was kind of committed because she needed to go and get Tommy back, but she could have remembered this at any point. And it feels a bit cheap that this is information Ellie had all along that she just gets to randomly pull out at the moment when the creators want her to spare Abby. But we the audience didn't have that information, but the character we were playing as did. And I never like it when you're playing as a character who makes a decision, a really important decision, based on information they had all along, but which the player had no way of knowing. So yeah, I don't really like the exact way it's done. I don't mind that being how it's done, conceptually, but I feel like something had to happen to spark that memory in Ellie's mind. Whether that be something Abby says or something Lev says, but that's not how it goes, so it feels a little bit cheap and manipulative. I like the ending where Ellie comes to the right decision, but she does it so late that it's effectively pointless because she's already lost and ruined everything. But I don't like how that ending is engineered. I feel like it needs to be earned a bit more. John, any chance you'll play the PS2 disaster Fallout Brotherhood of Steel? One day, I will. Yes. And it's not a long game, so it'll be a short series. But one day we'll have to do it, yes. John and Claire, what are your favourite utterly weird and offbeat fictional stories of any medium? I'm going to go for Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere, which is, it's just weird. It's just so bloody weird. It's just a series of weird things happening, and I kind of love it. It's possibly my favourite Neil Gaiman story. Though I should stress, of course, the original was a TV series, it was only novelised later, so take your pick which you want to engage with.
Now, I don't read or watch a lot that I would consider weird or offbeat. I like stories with, a narrative that has a beginning, a middle, and an end that makes sense and that has a fair amount of plot. So I don't know if that makes me completely basic or what, but I tend to not pick up things like new weird or stuff like that. I know it exists, but it's not my preference. So I immediately thought of games when I saw this question, and two that spring to mind are Death and Taxes, where you don't really know kind of what the story is and you're kind of making the story, and there's some weird stuff going on with the cat, and death and like the choices that you have to make, and there's a whole bunch of different endings. And obviously I think we played it to the end one time in a live stream, so I've only seen one of the endings, so I don't know what the rest of the storytelling for that is, but it was definitely weird and I absolutely loved it. And then the other thing that I thought of, please don't hate me, is Return of the Obra Dinn. Now I know we haven't actually finished the series, so I don't know how this story ends, because unless I get to like edit the end of it, then I won't know how it ends, because I haven't played it. But what I have seen so far, what I've edited so far of what John has played and what you've seen on the channel, like, that is just a fascinating way of telling a story with the time mechanic of it, and the overall like atmosphere of it, and the art is also really, really interesting. I mean, come to think of it, other Lucas Pope games as well have really interesting storytelling, so yeah. Those are the first things that popped to mind when I thought weird, offbeat storytelling, but definitely for me it's more of a game thing than in any other medium, really.
Oh, and here's a weirdly appropriate comment. Someone just giving me a recommendation, which is a video essay about how a game's value is determined not by its playtime, but how much time you spend thinking about it. Which certainly for me makes The Last of Us Part 2 quite a worthy investment, because I have spent a lot of time thinking about that. It's a fascinating thing, even though it's far from perfect. The essay in question, however, I have not seen, so I'll need to try and find some time to see that over this next month, because I do not have time to watch an entire video essay while recording the Patroncast at this exact moment in time. John, I was wondering if the old story about Caesar ruining the calendar by adding in July for Julius Caesar and August for Augustus was true. No. This is not true. I understand why it looks appealing, because, like, you know, it's really weird why November is, like, you know, the 11th month and December is the 12th month, when, like, if you took out July and August, then they would be 9th and 10th, which would make a lot more sense. But no, this is nonsense. Rome already had a 12-month calendar by the time Caesar showed up. The reason why November and December look wrong in our calendar in terms of them not being 9 and 10th is simply because January isn't the first month in the Roman calendar. March is the first month. That's when the calendar begins. So as a result of that, even though there's 12 months, November would still be 9th, December would still be 10th, January and February would then be 11th and 12th. So that's why it's not true. Do not think that's a thing. It's not a thing. John, could you please explain the following two memes? Why must everything be pink, purple, or whatever horrible pink colour is available in game? Because it amuses me in games where everything is like, you know, serious and proper, and we have to save the galaxy from the Doom Flayers, Like, to basically have everything be hot pink, it just entertains me. Alright, just entertains me. Why is Claire sick, Phil? Because during Bannerlord, at one point, I did something amazing. I think it was just a headshot at very long range, and I said, "Did you see that sick filth?" But, like, I must have slightly mumbled it, because everyone heard it as, "Did you see that sick Phil?" And people weren't sure why I called Claire Sick Phil. So since then, she's been Sick Phil. That's why, all very simple. John, are there any videos or games you put a lot of time into recording, and then ended up scrapping completely? Very rarely. The genre that does this to me most is Japanese-developed, extremely verbose games that take 10 million years to get going. So to Danganronpa, whichever the most recent one of that was, I played it for like 2 hours and just realised I don't really know what's going on, I'm not having a good time, and like, nothing from the last 2 hours is gameplay, so I can't really make a video out of this. And then more recently, Persona 5. Was it Persona 5 the Royal Edition? The version that made it to PC not so long ago anyway. I tried to play that. I really did. But like, again, like, when you get 2 hours in, and there's been basically no gameplay, then I kind of sort of say, no, this isn't right for the channel. Because, like, that game opens with a tiny bit of gameplay. There's a bit of platforming, bit of combat, just like, you know, a tiny mini dungeon. Then there's about 90 minutes of story, bit of walking around, bit of walking simulator, story. Say, where's the game? Where's the game? I don't know where the game is. Give me some game, Persona 5. And in the end, it was just like, no, this doesn't work. Not doing it. So it just got scrapped. So, yes, basically it tends to be extremely verbose Japanese narrative games that kind of do that for me. But it's very rare. John, any chance of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines? Yes, I'd like to get to it in early 2021, ahead of the sequel. So yes, that is absolutely in the plan. John, how are you staying physically and mentally healthy during the pandemic? Physically, it's just a case of making sure I get out every day and have a good stroll through some nice open areas so I'm not getting too close to anyone or anything. Mentally, it's not been so bad because, bear in mind, I'm staying at home a lot, working from home a lot, but I was already doing that. So it's not been such a bad mental adjustment for me. So in that regard, I suppose I've got a tiny bit of an advantage. John, when you joke calling American Independence Day Mutiny Day, or Colonial Treachery Day as I more commonly use, is this an actual sentiment among the British people? No, completely not. It's just a joke, 100%. I have never heard a single person who is, seriously, actually annoyed about, American independence in this day and age. John, I got a pet cat in Crusader Kings 3, but my wife was allergic to it, so I had to kill her. The wife, not the cat. What's an event you've come across that made you pause and think? There was one at the end of the, Madness and Torture video, where I had to choose between killing my son and heir, or accepting literal madness. There was going to be a permanent thing I was going to be stuck with. So that made me think for a moment before I decided to embrace madness. Also, if you had a new kitten or puppy and Claire was allergic, which would you pick? I mean, sadly, as sad as it is, I guess I'd have to pick Claire. But I'm sure Claire would be completely up for, making whatever adjustments were necessary. If there's any type of antihistamine or whatever, so we could keep that puppy and kitten, I know Claire would be up for it. Favourite and least favourite things in Crusader Kings 3 so far. So, favourite is the stress system, because I love how much it just kind of, softly encourages roleplay. Least favourite is childhood education, because that just feels like it's been a bit oversimplified, so now children just aren't as interesting till they become 16, whereas it felt like in Crusader Kings 2, it was a bit more interesting to kind of watch them develop and guide them in their education. It just doesn't feel as interesting in Crusader Kings 3, so I do hope education gets a bit of a once-over at some point. John, given the length of the queue the Doc Mitchell video is in, is Fallout 4 You Only Yo-Yo Once still 6 years out? Hopefully not. Hopefully, quite a bit sooner than that, in fact. John, how long did it take you to plan the Doc Mitchell run? Actually, not long at all. I planned it all in a single evening, so that was actually pretty efficient to put together, though it did take almost 2 full days of recording to get all the footage. John, do you plan on making any videos restoring the Roman Empire in Crusader Kings 3? Honestly, no. Never say never, but because I did that in Crusader Kings 2, I don't like to repeat myself. I like to do different things, so it's not going to be high on my list of things to do. John, what monitor or monitors do you use? Just asking because I've been looking at getting a couple of new ones for a while. I was wondering what you use. Okay, bad idea to ask me this, because I'm pretty useless when it comes to tech. And also, at one point I did spend some good money on a really good monitor, which I then went on to basically never use, and it just became my secondary screen. But I did get one of the Asus ROG Swift, I've got that name in front of me, that's why I know this, PG278QR 27-inch, then some other stuff. It was really expensive, and then I basically never used it. And instead, I used as my primary monitor the native 1080p monitor that just was really basic and came with my computer, because it's native 1080p, so I can just run games at 1080p, so therefore I can capture them at 1080p, which is therefore a much better idea. So, yeah, that was a bit of a waste of money. Basically, I wouldn't go to me for tech purchase advice. Bad call. And finally, people seem to be frequently asking for Fallout 4 yogurt in all of your live streams. What do you imagine the flavour would be? Oh, it would be chocolate, coffee, swirl of caramel separating the two. In short, It's gonna be delicious. Right, that's your lot, ladies and gentlemen. That is the Patroncast. It's been a great month, actually. I've really enjoyed August. Thank you all so very, very much for being the people that keeps this nonsense going, because I've had a wonderful time in August. I've got to play all sorts of games really, really early. I've got to play loads of Crusader Kings 3. I got hold of the new Outer Worlds early. I got hold of the new Total War 3 Kingdoms early. It's been a good month. It is a privilege to do this, and it's you guys that let me do this. So thank you all so very, very much. Hopefully you join me for the Patroncast next month too. And hopefully it will keep being nice and cool. All glory to autumn. Hooray. But in the meantime, I've been John. This has been many a true nerd. And this has been the August sort of 2020 Patroncast. Thank you very much, and goodbye.